I worked on airplanes for the first 8 years, 6 years on active duty in the Air Force. And the 2 years that I spent full time at Indiana University, I was hired by a civilian airline and I worked at Stanford Field in Louisville, Kentucky. Little did I know that the company that hired me, that had the maintenance contract for UPS, because that's their overnight hub, was actually a CIA front. It was called Evergreen Airlines.
Oh my God.
And I had no idea, but I worked on the ramp there for 2 years. I got my commission. I was in the ROTC program at Indiana University. I went back on active duty as a second lieutenant. I spent the next 22 years as an officer, and I retired in 2008. And it wasn't until around 2020 with the whole COVID, things kind of shifted for me. I had been a student of history. I have 6 different degrees. I've got a collection of like 700 books, all nonfiction. So I've always been an avid reader. It was the first time that I realized our government are actively trying to kill us. And that shifted my entire world.
Colonel Towner Watkins, hello. Oh my God, I'm so excited to
Hi,
talk
how are
to you.
you?
Okay, I'm great. My producer Emily is so jealous and so upset that she's not on this call. She introduced me to you, and my mind is really, really blown.
Do you know about Gladio at all?
I know about false flags. I never knew it was called Operation Gladio. I did not know about how it became named Gladio. I did not know all of the beginnings of it. I know more stuff about maybe going back towards the Knights of Malta and stuff like that. And then I just caught that you were talking about a lot of that stuff. And I just happen to be immersed in that right now. So I know it all ties together. I want to know, because I know you were serving in the military during 9/11. We don't have to talk about 9/11 yet, but I might want to ask you about that later. But can you just tell my audience
Sure.
about your past and when you served and you were in the Air Force and you were an engineer, right? You tell me.
Actually, I was in aircraft maintenance.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
I worked on airplanes for the first 8 years, 6 years on active duty in the Air Force. And the 2 years that I spent full time at Indiana University, I was hired by a civilian airline. And I worked at Stanford Field in Louisville, Kentucky. Little did I know that the company that hired me, that had the maintenance contract for UPS, because that's their overnight hub, was actually a CIA front. It was called Evergreen Airlines.
Oh my God.
And I had no idea, but I worked on the ramp there for 2 years. I got my commission. I was in the ROTC program at Indiana University. I went back on active duty as a second lieutenant. I spent the next 22 years as an officer, and I retired in 2008. And it wasn't until around 2020 with the whole COVID that things kind of shifted for me. I had been a student of history. I have 6 different degrees. I've got a collection of like 700 books, all nonfiction. So I've always been an avid reader. But it was the first time that I realized our government are actively trying to kill us. And that shifted my entire world. And it just so happens that I happen to be reading a series of books by an author called Anthony Sutton at the time. And his whole premise was, it goes back until the late 1800s, that this group in London and New York City was funding the Bolshevik Revolution. They were funding FDR. They were funding Hitler. And to me, those are like, wait a minute. You mean the same guys that created communism created Nazism? And in our paradigm, that's like the far left and the far right. And then he talks about the Hegelian dialect of them artificially creating these, polar opposites, and they do it to control people. So it's like a massive psyops that if you create the far left and the far right, you can use those mechanisms through terrorism and all types of other psychological operations to control people. And the phrase that many people use is chaos and control. And so my dear husband, who's been, with me through all of this, and he listens to me talk about all of the research that I do, he came in one day and he was like, "Hey, do you remember that show we used to watch called Get Smart?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but what's that got to do with Operation Gladio?" And he says, "Well, do you remember the organization's name, the good guys and the bad guys?" And I said, "No." And he says, "It's called Chaos and Control."
Oh, oh my God. I don't even, wow. I was a kid. I was a kid for that one, but I loved that show. Wow. Yeah. Well, there you have your
So
Hollywood
if you
camp.
understand that they create the chaos, yes. And if you understand that they create the chaos in order to implement the control mechanisms to control us, it kind of puts everything in perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I've been, seems to be the theme lately. It's not much different than the way they create an illness and offer you the solution. Um, I mean, I want to go down 5,000 lists
Correct.
of things that I thought might have been false flags. But I guess a lot of this starts with, well, at least Gladio, is it not, I mean, this whole idea of these stay behind crew, is that what you call it? And all the
There
all the coups and all of, trying to obtain all the natural, the resources, all of that stuff. I mean, it's so deep. It goes so deep, and then it goes back so far. It's insane because every single name, when I was listening to you talk about a lot of this stuff, and it's just like every CIA, every head of the CIA, every single coup, from more known names like Gaddafi to names that people might not know in my world. But it's astounding to me. And, Operation Northwoods, like all of that stuff, I would love for you to explain. I mean, right now today, like I said, I was in this whole P2 thing, the P2 membership, which is a propaganda due. Is that what it's called? Propaganda due. I don't even know why it's
Yes.
called that, but I mean,
Yes.
maybe we can start there since I'm an Italian and it goes back to all of these crazies in Italy, and it might be fun to tie in a little bit of the mafia stuff because my audience likes to hear that. Sometimes if you wrap it up in a genre or a subculture, it becomes more, I mean, no one can believe that these stories are real because no one can believe that people really are this evil. I mean, it's so unbelievably evil and diabolical. And they've been doing this to us forever and ever. So anyway, maybe we can start with the inception of Gladio, the name.
So the inception of Gladio actually starts in Italy. There was in during World War II, towards the end, when the Nazis realized they were going to lose. In northern Italy, there was a meeting of a guy by the name of General Wolfe, who was a Nazi, and he had several other people with him. And he met with Alan Dulles and a Major General Lyman Lemonsker, and he'll come back into the story later. But the it was called Operation Sunrise, if anybody wants to research it. They met, and because Hitler had used General Wolfe to create the stay behind networks, that's originally what they were referred to. They just now generically are called Operation Gladio, but when the Nazis conceived of these stay behind units, it was General Wolfe and his eastern sector uh, subordinate was General Reinhard Gehlen. And so as the Nazis pushed into the Soviet Union, they seeded all of these stay-behind units. And basically what a stay-behind unit is, it's a cell of anywhere from 12 to 20 people. They have dedicated caches of weapons, which included explosives, armament, ammunition, money, and communication equipment. And upon activation, they would fall in on this cache of buried weapons, generally in a wooded area, and they would use those to attack the Soviets. And that was kind of the design of them. So as the Soviets started pushing them back, these stay-behind units were supposed to pop up, and they were seated in Ukraine, which is where the Nazi Banderites of today trace their history back. They were trained by Otto Skorzeny, another Nazi, under the command of Reinhard Gehlen. And there was just this massive array all over Nazi-occupied territory. So the meeting of Operation Sunrise between Dulles and General Wolf was, hey, we have all of this buried evidence of what the Soviet capability is, what they're like, documents, and we will exchange that along with our Stay Behind Network communication plan. If you agree and you get the Catholic Church involved to ratline all of this list of people and save us. And so that agreement was made, and we all know about the rat lines out of Nazi Germany and the savings of all, and people just kind of fixate on Operation Paperclip. That was the very least of the rat lines out. The real rat lines that no one ever talks about is the people like Klaus Barbie and Reinhard Gehlen and all of these other people. They were pre-positioned in safe houses throughout Italy and Spain in order to then be able to get them out of the country and into primarily South America. But they literally went everywhere. They went to Japan, they went to Korea, they went to Egypt. And so now you've got these Nazi cells seated all over the world, and they're going to continue this Operation Gladio type stay behind network all over the world. But when they stood up NATO, NATO accepted the charter of basically managing these stay behinds for all NATO units. And it was all a result of Operation Sunrise.
Okay. And what is Operation Sunrise exactly? Those are the stay behinds.
No, Operation Sunrise was just that meeting. It was a planning meeting because it was very clandestine, top secret. Yeah, and it was conducted by the OSS, which we know basically transitions into the CIA. And the fact that Alan Dulles was in charge of this highly classified meeting and this arrangement, because keep in mind, we're still in World War II. There's been no peace declaration. They are negotiating basically this transfer of the stay behind units, because in the mind of the people in the United States and in Britain, the Soviet Union was really, even though they were our ally at the time, they were the enemy. So if we already have all of these stay behind units seated throughout all of this territory, to include ones that's going to be occupied by the Soviet Union, like Romania, Hungary, Ukraine, they're everywhere that the Soviets step foot.
A really quick break to say we're glad you found the Ultra Free podcast and hope you're enjoying this episode. A great way to support the podcast is to head over to the Ultra Free website to buy merch. Link in the show notes below. We have cool hats and hand-screened t-shirts, and we'd love to see you in them. So buy a few. Take photos and tag us on your socials to spread the Ultra Free vibes. Like and subscribe and leave comments when you have them. And remember, we don't need to be right. We just need to be free. Ultra Free. Now back to the episode.
So were the stay behind units to fight communism? Is that what it really was about? Or?
Well, that's what we were told.
Okay.
But there's not a single time in the history of the stay behind units post World War II that they were ever used to engage the Soviet Union. They were 100% of the time activated for domestic terrorism.
So, okay. Is that when you mentioned Ukraine, and this, I'll just bring it to something that's really present. I mean, it's not that present, but the last, I mean, now we're in another war, but as far as Ukraine, would that have been considered the Azov battalion, those guys that were training?
Yes.
Okay. So and those are considered the Nazis of Ukraine that nobody was talking about during, a lot of people here in America were waving. They didn't know what was going on. I don't think people knew what was going on. I know that the 2014 coup in Ukraine, just listening to all the, like the Victoria Nuland phone calls and all that sort of stuff, like it was very obvious what we were doing over there. I still don't know what exactly it was that
Correct.
we wanted over there. That might be a good thing for some people in my audience to know. I mean, I know that there were some natural resources that were of interest, and I know that there were a lot of God, I mean, and then of course now I also want to talk about what they were doing with Mossadegh in Iran, because that's on everybody's mind right now, and I don't think a lot of people know the history there either. I mean, when I was young, I thought the Shah was a great guy because I went to school with the Shah's daughter, so I'm thinking, he's protected here. I was with them when I was a kid. I was with her security guards. They were in my classroom every day. And we thought that was, back then we didn't know the truth. And now with these phones and the internet, it's like, as much as they're trying to suppress the truth, there's a lot of truth just kind of seeping out. And for those that want to see it, it's right there. I mean, God, there's so many things that I don't want to miss talking about with you, like US aid, which I also think is super important because that's, what is at the top of a lot of people's, it's in people's memories over what was happening right after Trump was elected. But okay, so back to Italy and back to Gladio and back to the 70s and the 60s. What was happening there? And was it not the 60s when they got completely, when they started to get busted and things started to materialize and people started to see that this was actually an operation?
So if you go back to just a little bit more on the history part, in 1948, so post World War II, we've got to get all of Europe in NATO. The very first election interference the CIA conducted was the Italian presidential election in 1948. The CIA spent $35 million handing out money throughout the country of Italy because basically there were two people running, one that wanted in NATO and one that did not. And the election was swayed in favor of the prime minister that wanted to join NATO. So that was the very first CIA election interference under the auspices of the CIA. They've interfered in every election since then. So now we've got all of these stay behind units seated all over Italy. Well, in the 1960s and 70s, there was some very nefarious things going on in Italy. The intelligence apparatus, the military apparatus, the Catholic Church, and the P2 Lodge, all of those. So there's a little bit of seepage of information. A few reporters are kind of sniffing around, and any reporter that dared write anything about Operation Gladio was murdered. Any prosecutor that tried to look into or conduct an investigation, murdered. Any judge, if a prosecutor was able to survive multiple attempted assassinations to the point where you could even get it in front of a judge, they'd kill the judge. And so you fast forward to around the late 1980s, it's just exploding as far as the information goes. So in 1990, on the 2nd of August, which, by the way, happens to be the day I arrived at the Rome airport for a 3-year assignment in Italy, which is weird how this story keeps intersecting my career. So I arrive at the Rome airport. That is also the same day that Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And the Prime Minister Andreotti goes in front of the Senate. It's not exposed to the public just yet. It will be in about a month. But he goes in front of the Senate in Italy and says, hey, guys, Gladio is real. we've been doing this. We were responsible for the Bologna bombing. We were responsible for the bank bombing. We assassinated some cops, and we did it all dressed up as communists so that we could control basically the population through terrorism. And this is so explosive. But what you find out in Danielle Ganser's book, NATO's Secret Army, is every country in NATO, when this gets exposed in 1990, goes to their government and is like, hey, they're saying this is a NATO thing. Where's our Gladio operators? And everybody collectively says, oh, we don't have time to talk about that. We're getting ready to invade Iraq, for their attack on Kuwait. And so to me, the whole Desert Storm 1 was set up to bury Operation Gladio and the exposure of what was going to come down the pike, because these were not just in NATO countries. They were in all of the Scandinavian countries. They were set up in non-NATO countries as well. And to your point, in Iran, I stumbled across about a year ago the fact that we had seated stay-behind units in the tribal area of southern Iran in preparation for the Mossadegh overthrow, where we reinstalled the Shah. And so this tactic, this capability was seeded, like I said, all over the world. And they are based on this Nazi idea of stay-behind units.
I mean, is it still a Nazi idea at this point? I mean, because there's false flags. I feel like there's a modern version of it if it's not called Gladio, or maybe it still is called Gladio. I don't know.
So I still call it Gladio, and the idea that it is based on a Nazi idea is chilling enough. That doesn't mean Nazis still control it. This was done by NATO. This was done by governments, all part of NATO, and it was done by governments outside of NATO. So to your point, in Iran, where after the Shah comes back into power and we overthrow the government in 1953, what happens is the USAID people, they flood into that area. Major General Norman Schwarzkopf Sr., Storm Norman of Iraq Desert Storm's dad, is hired to come into Iran and set up the Savak, which was basically a state-ran terror organization that created black site prisons. And the Office of Public Safety, which was part of USAID, would hire former cops from the United States and was embedded with CIA agents. And they set up this police state in Iran so that anybody that is a resistance or what they refer to as guerrilla fighters that don't want to go along with this imposed, they want their democracy back. They want to be able to elect people like Mossadegh. But anybody that doesn't go along with it are rounded up in police raids by the Savak, and they're stuck in these black site prisons and tortured to reveal who in their network is anti-Shah. And so while the U.S. media is flashing all of these 1970s and 80s, really cool people and this modern state of Iran, behind all of that is this terrorist organization. And this gets implemented over 90 times that I have tracked in different countries, sometimes multiple coups within the same country. Like we overthrew Ukraine in 2004 and 2014. It wasn't just one time.
Okay.
Anytime you elect somebody that is outside this control mechanism, they are going to get overthrown. At least they're going to attempt to overthrow them.
So everyone thinks that it's America that's doing all the overthrowing and that we are terrorists. And so who really is behind all of this? And do they use America? Are we because we're a young country, are we being used to run this whole. I mean, I know that there's been evil going on since the dawn of time. I mean, I think that the Knights of Malta is that not like the the 1100s or whatever that was? But do we use America? Do we use Israel? Are we using these two countries to perpetuate the insanity of all these other, I don't know, faceless people?
So let's go back in history. In pre-World War I, we had the East and West Indies of the British Empire, the Dutch Empire, the Portugal Empire. They all had these companies that were marquee to the government. And their job was to hire intelligence and paramilitary to colonialize the world, right, under their company. And the spoils of the enslaved people would then come to the market in these colonial empires. So all we're doing is perpetuating that under government structures. So you have a paramilitary capability and an intelligence capability that these people had to pay for themselves. Well, guess what happened after World War II? We redrew all of the maps of the world. We created new countries that never existed before. And I'll get back to that in a second. But we just perpetuated the same colonial model under the moniker of democracy, right? So we're going to overthrow a duly elected prime minister in Iran to install a what? Not a democracy, a Shah. The same thing happened in the year after that in Guatemala. Well, who is doing this? I refer to them as the international syndicate because it's not one country and it's not one nationality. It's not one religion. There is a group of oligarchs, for lack of a better word, that basically control this entire apparatus. So after World War II, for the first time ever in America, we had a standing military and we had a standing intelligence agency. We never had anything like that. So and this happened around the world. The Korea had a standing military for the first time. They created the KCIA. They even named it after the CIA. And all of these countries post-World War II did this, and they did it collectively. They work as a super body, and people, because the CIA is on a U.S. government org chart, think they work for the U.S. government. They have never worked for the U.S. government. There is a reason why Alan Dulles and people like Alan Dulles were placed into the CIA. These were all the lawyers for these same corporate oligarchs. They're bankers, they're attorneys, and all they do is place them into government organizations to represent them, not the U.S. government, and certainly not the U.S. people. And so they have used these, and it's a brilliant idea if you think about it. If you run a company, if I can offload the expense, which is a huge expense, by the way, of an entire paramilitary capability and an intelligence function off on the taxpayers, why would you not do that? And no one is ever called into question. And yet there's repeated instances where even the president has said not to do something and they do it anyway.
So, I mean, there's so many questions, and I want to go all the way back in time, but I feel like I should not do that to you. I should just have you back 100 times. I'm going to keep it present with what's happening today. Aside from maybe just explain for people that don't know what Operation Gladio exactly is, as far as false flags. You know, we hear false flags, but what is it? What is a false flag considered in the military?
So the best thing for anybody to read if they want to research that is, you mentioned it, Operation Northwood. So that same guy that I mentioned, Lyman Leminsker, sitting at Operation Sunrise next to Alan Dulles, well, he grows up. He gets promoted 2 more times to a full general, a 4-star general. He gets put on in the position of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So he's colluding with Alan Dulles. Alan Dulles gets fired after the Bay of Pigs, and Lyman Leminsker sitting in the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He authors a document that basically emphatically describes false flags. He says that we have to finish the job in Cuba. We have to overthrow the Castro regime. So I'm going to put on paper, because it's classified until it wasn't. I'm going to put on a piece of paper what I think we could do. And he actually articulates using what at least one segment of our Gladio cells in America were called the Cuban exiles. He's going to dress up Cuban exiles as Cuban Castro soldiers. They're going to wear Castro's uniforms, and they are going to bomb U.S. cities. They are going to fly drone aircraft into buildings. They are going to blow up ships, and they are going to do so and blame it on Castro's army in order to justify a full-scale military invasion into the island of Cuba. It is all written out for everybody to understand. Those are false flags that would be blamed on Cuba, conducted by our own military and Central Intelligence Agency.
And that's Lemonsker? Is that his name? Lemonsker?
That's Lyman Lemonsker. Yes. So after he does that, JFK says, is he what?
Oh, I was going to ask you if he was the one that JFK was like, whoa, 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 slow down. And then they moved him correct? And then he was the head of, was he not?
Where did they move him?
To NATO, I think. No, I don't know. You tell me. You tell me.
He was moved to NATO.
Oh, okay.
He was moved to NATO in charge of the entire Operation Gladio program.
So they had an official Gladio program in NATO. It eventually became an official program. So how many false flags that sound exactly like that scenario, which was never executed, right? That particular one was never executed, but how many of them were? Are we allowed to say that? Are we allowed to talk about ones that are
correct? That's a big question. Well, in my estimation, 9/11 certainly was.
Okay. Yes. I mean, I am of that school of thought as well, and have been forever. What do you think about
if you go back and you start looking at all of the terrorist events in the United States, you, weirdly enough, even Waco, the Oklahoma bombing, you find all of these people in the close proximity of the same people. There's lots of overlap there. The Weather Underground back in the 60s. The CIA was actually seeding people into these, kind of resistance cells, if you will, and co-opting them. And it's just amazing how many, the whole Jim Jones and drinking the Kool-Aid, that 100% was MK Ultra. The compound in Guyana that he took all of those people to had a dual purpose. It was originally used as an Operation Gladio terrorist training camp. And Jim Jones himself was working for the CIA when we overthrew Brazil in 1963-64 timeframe.
Absolutely insane. I heard you also say at one point that we thought that Eisenhower was good, but actually he was not, because he was tied to all of this stuff, which is like, I mean, who was the only president? I mean, do all the presidents, are they all aware? Do they all perpetuate false flags to further agendas? Are they all tied into it at all times? Because the American people put so much stock in
Who's
these
the one
presidents.
that got assassinated?
Well, I mean, of course, because I think he knew so much about so many different things that it was like, just take this man out, JFK.
Yeah, if you go back and you listen to his speech about secret societies, he is talking about Operation Gladio.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I with him, for me, it's been like, I don't know if it's if it was the Ben Gurion stuff, and then it was the, knowing about the Space Alliance stuff, and then it was, then this story as well with this, with the Lemonsker guy. I mean, there's just so many, I guess there's just so much corruption. And by the time he had gotten in there since 1948, I guess the corruption had gone haywire. And he steps in there and he's like, hold on a minute. Like, I don't think this isn't the way things should be. Boom, goodbye. Was that the moment where all presidents decided I play ball?
Well, they all played ball before that, and they all played ball after that until President Trump. And if you go back to Lyman Lemonsker for a minute, this guy just is like the Forrest Gump of Operation Gladio. He keeps popping up everywhere. While he was at NATO, they tried to assassinate Charles de Gaulle, the president, prime minister, whatever they have over there, the president of France, over 30 times. And Charles de Gaulle calls Lyman Lemonsker because NATO was originally headquartered in Paris, France. He calls Lyman Lemonsker into his office and tells him, you have 6 months to get your ass out of my country. And that's when NATO moved to its current location. They were thrown out of France. France withdrew from NATO immediately. And most people don't know that history either.
No,
I
I
certainly
don't.
didn't. And I'm in the military. I had never heard that story. So Charles de Gaulle said after JFK was assassinated that the same people that were trying to kill him killed JFK. And just for your audience, every country under NATO named their program. Gladio is in Italian a word for short sword, like stab you in the back. And every country had a different name. Like they called them gray wolves in Turkey. They called them a Agenter Press in Portugal. But in France, the largest element of Gladio was called OAS. And the OAS agents are the ones that were trying to kill Charles de Gaulle. There were 2 OAS agents present in Dallas, both of which were assassins on the day he was killed. One of them was escorted to the Mexican border that night. And that's actually a matter of record. And Charles de Gaulle was so concerned about that. And we actually have declassified cables from France to the French embassy in Mexico, wanting to know that assassin's whereabouts because de Gaulle was supposed to be traveling to Mexico the following week.
Wow. There's actually a documentary that was incredible about JFK's assassination by a French filmmaker. I can't remember the name. It's going to drive me crazy. I'll put it in the links for this episode. They also did a huge expose on the 9/11. Well, I mean, that was a false flag, JFK's assassination. But whoever this French filmmaker is, they know what the hell's going on. It's pretty amazing. And there's so much information in there that it's almost hard to follow. Okay. So now all of the heads of the CIA, from Dulles to Angleton to, what was Dulles' what was the I mean, this is not a Gladio thing, but I guess you know so much about this stuff, it's worth even just going over. But the Bush Association to World War II and the funding of both sides of the war and who was funding both, because I think a lot of people really have no clue about that, except for people in the last couple of years like us that are thirsty to understand the past, to figure out how to deal with what we're living in right now. I don't think a lot of people are aware that it's the same people funding both sides.
The best resource I could recommend to your audience is a trilogy that was written by Anthony Sutton. It's Antony Sutton, and he wrote 3 books. Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, Wall Street and Hitler, and Wall Street and FDR. If you want to understand the corporations, the oligarchs, the international syndicate that was behind all of that, those 3 books, they're not big books. They're relatively short reads, but it explains, it has photocopies of evidence in them. He was basically told to leave the Hoover Institute if he published those 3 books, and he left to publish them.
Wow. So, okay. So those are tentacles that go back, I guess, as far as a lot of these families and a lot of these bloodlines go. I mean, I know I've even heard you talk about how Trump was his uncle, maybe. I mean, aside from the Tesla association, but his family was Heinz. And the Heinz Association to, oh my God, now I'm spacing on that. You tell me, please, because I do think Trump. You are, because a lot of people are mad at Trump right now. People are mad. Everybody's up in arms, and I'm still just, I'm always in this place of I'm watching the story unfold because the story is still developing.
So I don't talk too much about Trump's family, but what I have pointed out multiple times is just over the last several years that I've been researching this, I have basically my own little hit list of things that have to be taken out in order to free the world of this octopus as Danny Casolaro referred to it, because they have a stranglehold on all of us. And my going in position for President Trump was, I will believe that he understands this entire network if he does a couple of things. Close USAID. He has yet to close the National Endowment for Democracy, but that's kind of an evil twin. That has to go as well. And for the first time in history, because we haven't even talked about the narco weapons and human trafficking piece of this entire puzzle. So you can imagine, if you're going to see these terror cells all over the world, you have to have an illicit funding mechanism for it, because it is not part of the line item budget for appropriations to seed into the CIA. So how are they funding all of this? Well, they fund it off of controlling the narco trafficking, illicit weapons trafficking, and human trafficking. And that's clear. That dates back to 1945, when we got in bed with Chiang Kai-shek, who was the opium drug lord, fighting Mao in the during and in the immediate aftermath of World War II. Now, obviously, he lost to Mao, and he was kicked out of mainland China. Now, this is a Chinese general kicked out of mainland China. So the CIA basically adopts him, and because he's running the entire opium network over there, and they move him to Burma. He gets kicked out of Burma. And so they take the island of Formosa and they change the name shingle on the outside to Taiwan, and they install him in Taiwan. And the US recognizes Taiwan as quote unquote China for like the next 30 years. And he is literally running the opium empire out of Taiwan. The CIA gave him ships, they gave him aircraft, they set up the civil air transport to move all of his KMT army around. He's the guy that came up with the philosophy that all you have to do is call a former army a political party, and you get instantaneous recognition as legitimate and a democracy. So for those 30 years that he declared martial law and ran Taiwan as a military dictator, we were told in America that that's a thriving democracy. They have a president, they have a political party. That political party is actually called the KMT, which is his military.
Wow. I mean, next they're going to try to, they would have tried to tell us that Mao was a saint. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of the dilemma people get into. People think that if you say that Mao did not want opium in China, that means that, somehow you love Mao. I don't love Mao. He was a communist. There's shades of gray to all of this. None of what I just said paints Mao as a good guy. What it does say is that he had a definitive, we don't want opium poisoning China. They fought 2 wars with the UK, the British, who were importing Indian opium into China, basically trying to take over China. And so Mao just said, no, you're poisoning our people. We don't want it here. That doesn't change the fact that he was still a communist, right, and he did some really bad things. Yeah. People think in black and white way too often.
Well, I think we've been taught, I mean, just, I'm even, when I watch my kids in school and their lessons and what they're learning and the way they teach it all, it's been completely twisted and turned and it's all biased. And I mean, as much, and it's like what I said before, we have this information highway right now. As much as they try to suppress it, it's still just seeping out. But lately I've been just stacking books up in case they decide to shut the whole thing down on us, like a book burning. So at least we'll have some of our books. I mean, I know you have that big old, I'm coming to your house, to that library. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, tell me more about U.S. aid, because I know that's a big, all the Democrats went psychotic when that was being torn to pieces. A lot of people, even the people that voted for Trump and were all on that side with Elon Musk and everything, stopped trusting Elon Musk during that U.S. aid thing. People believed that they were, taking it apart and going through it just to get the surveillance system really, really rocking and rolling, which, might be part of the motives. Who the hell knows? But has there been any signs of them actually doing the right thing within this administration, trying to take apart U.S. aid? And just explain to some of the people listening how U.S. aid has perpetuated this sort of terrorist organization, that it actually, I would tell my friends that one day, I can't believe they're taking this away from these people and they're taking dance lessons away from these people in this country. And I'm like, slow down. I think there's more to the story than just these charitable, I mean, I feel like this country hides behind charitable everything all the time. I feel like a lot of countries do, and it's all a lot of horse shit. So can you tell them what U.S. aid really does?
Well, first of all, I would caution you to never call it U.S. aid, because it is not. It is U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. Yes. That is another PSYOP. They specifically named it that to make people think that they're an aid organization. They have never, ever been an aid organization, ever. They are all about the Rockefellers, the Whitneys, the big oligarchs, United Fruit, all behind them. They want international development that they benefit from with an enslaved population in a foreign country. So USAID had 2 primary sub-organizations. I mentioned one, the Office of Public Safety. Now, Drea, think about this for a second. If I'm going to live in the Animal Farm 1984 paradigm, and I'm going to go in and overthrow a country, what better name of an organization to set up black site prisons to torture the people, put them on an airplane drugged and throw them out in the ocean so sharks can eat them, than the Office of Public Safety?
Jesus.
That's the name of the USAID entity that did this. And it's the one that hired former cops. If you want to look up one, Dan Mederone. Dan Mederone was the police chief in Richmond, Indiana. And he was hired to go to Uruguay. And after we overthrew that government, they brought in USAID's Office of Public Safety to set up their black site prisons, their torture, their disappearing units where they just mass murdered people that usually as a result of the torture. You would be shocked at all of the information that is out there on this that no one ever bothers looking at. But the Office of Public Safety hired Dan Miteron, deployed him. He was in Brazil when we overthrew the government in Brazil. He's in Uruguay and setting up this prison torture program. And the Tupamaros, which are the resistance, the people that were fighting back against the CIA's presence and the USAID and the CIA and all of those in Uruguay, they kidnapped Dan Miteron and kill him.
Oh, wow.
Because of his role in the torturing of their fellow countrymen. And do you know that this, low public safety, Office of Public Safety worker has this big funeral, and the who's who of Washington, D.C., to include the Secretary of State, show up at his funeral? Does that tell you anything?
Wow. So how many?
So there's.
No, go ahead. You finish. I want to hear the rest of this. Keep going.
There's one other office that I want to name for your audience, because there's another subset in the USAID. It's called the Office of Transition Initiatives. This is basically another entity that functions very much like the Office of Public Safety. The transition initiatives was never transitioning countries from democracy, from a non-democracy to a democracy, although that's what all the material says. Every single time, there's no exception that I found so far. When we went in and overthrew a government, normally a military dictator took over, but certainly a dictator like the Shah took over. We never transitioned a single country to democracy.
Yeah, I figured that much. Wow. How many of these, what we would call here in America, these extremist groups all over the place that are actually fighting for their independence and fighting to have us out of their countries, how many of those have we coined as terrorists when they're actually just fighting against our terrorism? In each country with, maybe like say the Sandinistas or I don't know, even in the Middle East.
From my experience,
every single one.
In my experience, every single one of them. The Tupamaros were called guerrillas. All they were indigenous people that wanted their freedom back. They wanted to be able to live in a democracy. The people that were fighting back against Pinochet after we overthrew the government of Salvador Allende in Chile, they were all called terrorists. They were all called, guerrillas. And just so that your audience understands this, they have to be labeled that. So just to be clear, in Chile, they had an election. They elected Salvador Allende in the 1970s timeframe, late 1960s. And the CIA absolutely did not want him to be in charge because he was going to nationalize the copper mine, because the copper concession was held by a U.S. corporation that was basically paying them like $1.80 a day to work in hellish conditions. And they were never allowed to unionize, to demand better wages, because the CIA would just infiltrate the unions and create false flags to demonize the union people, or they just kidnap the union leader and kill him. All of these things happened. And so Salvador Allende gets elected anyway. They even bought the New York Times version of the media, the CIA did, in Chile. He was such a bad guy that they actually had free press. And they published awful articles after awful articles about him lying. And so he was deemed a communist. He had nothing to do with communism, but that was a necessary label that the CIA had to put on him in order to justify or trigger a finding, because the law, or the National Security Action Memorandum that was in effect at the time, said that you could basically assassinate anybody you call a communist. So if you go back in history, it's not clear to me who was a communist and who wasn't, based on what principle, because everybody they wanted to kill got labeled a communist, whether they were or not. And so in Chile specifically, after they assassinated Salvador Allende, they had already assassinated the head military guy, because he was a Salvador Allende fan. And so they assassinated him. They tried to assassinate another military leader while he was in Italy, and using Gladio. And so the military guy that they favored was Pinochet. So they install him as the dictator in Chile, and all the resistance people are now labeled guerrillas, because they don't support a military installed dictator that the CIA controls, that is opening all of their natural resources to American oligarchs. And so then the military, using CIA intelligence that's all fake, labels these guerrillas as these resistance fighters as guerrillas, and then they can create counter guerrilla techniques.
We lost power. I don't know why. You know why? Because they don't want us talking about this. That's why. They don't want Hollywood talking about this, even though I'm the anti-Hollywood over here. I guess I'm the only person that talks about this stuff. Well, there's a couple of them. There's a few of them. Some of them don't live. You know, I have a force field of God around me. So let's hope that I'm going to be fine, because I still have questions. If you have a little more time for me, can I
do.
ask?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So, I guess we were talking about all of the cells, all of these so-called extremists in every country. I guess now in the Middle East, we have all these so-called terrorist organizations. Which ones are them, in your opinion? Are they like, it's a hard to draw the line, because everyone is talking about, everybody's divided right now over Israel and all of this stuff. My innate sense, and again, because I don't know enough about history, and I clearly don't know anything about the military, but I feel like America and Israel, because they're both new-ish, well, Israel with, 1948, and then America being a young country, I do feel like we are being used to do the bidding for these oligarchs that come from all different countries, all different religions, all different places. People, everybody's got this thing right now in their heads that it's, it's Israel, it's Israel, it's Israel, and it's America, and it's America, and they're demonizing Americans and Jews. And it's like, I feel, and I have a lot of Jewish friends and family, and I'm sort of like, guys, relax. I'm telling you, it is not about you guys in particular. This is a government deep state operation. Like this is a much bigger than, but they're creating, a war zone on the ground here in America and dividing us, which they've been doing with every single anybody who is, I don't know, either marginalized or not even marginalized. They'll just take any group of people and try to figure out a way to oppose them, even just, left and right. I mean, my girlfriend just sent me a text message saying Trump is trying to take people away from the left and right idea and to become independent, which I thought was very interesting to see that just now.
So let me give you a little bit more meat on what you were just saying. So the the term strategy of tension is basically what you're referring to. You're referring to um, the proverbial left and right type paradigm that people have, and it's false. So if you look after World War II, we mentioned earlier about the creation of all of these artificial borders that never existed before. Israel's a great example of that. We created Pakistan out of nowhere. We borrowed some of Afghanistan, we borrowed some of India, and we create this thing that never existed. Where's one of the tension points in the Middle East? Pakistan, right? We created East Pakistan, which loops all the way around India. So we basically surround India with people that had been fighting internally, the Muslims against the Hindus in Italy. So that's a point of friction. I mentioned Taiwan. We put the arch nemesis of Mao on an island off the coast, and for the next 40 years, he's attacking mainland China using the CIA. There was a whole operation ran inside of Tibet where we seated stay-behind units in there. We did it with the Uyghur Muslims in interior to China. We have been at war with China this entire time. We just use cutouts. And that's kind of the way this thing operates and the way they control all of these different things. Israel is no different. Israel was set where it was set so that they can have instant war on demand forever. They knew that it was a very unpopular idea to do what they did, and they didn't care. It's going to be there, and we're going to be able to use it anytime we want war in the Middle East. There's lots of these different locations. The splitting up of Korea. They promised both Vietnam and Korea that they would have a unifying election after World War II. Did that happen? No. And they made sure it didn't happen. And there were stay-behind units in both of those countries. And so, again, we went right into an immediate war with Korea just to make sure that they were never a unified country after World War II. And so if you start looking around the world and understanding that the military industrial complex needs conflict in order to generate profits. So if you have a hammer, everything becomes a nail.
Okay. So then, okay, so what about the idea of sleeper cells? I mean, I still don't know that I all of these organizations that are in the Middle East that are fighting to protect their sovereignty, but Americans think that they're terrorist organizations against Americans. And then we have the sleeper cells here in America. So, and then those can be considered false flags if something should happen.
So you have to determine, first of all, who the sleeper cell sponsors are, right? If you go back to the 1980s in Afghanistan, where we use Pakistan, because, you know, we basically control Pakistan, the CIA, not we in the US, the ISI, which is their equivalent of the CIA, is funneled hundreds of millions of dollars to fund the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen in Afghanistan, supposedly fighting the Russians, who we baited in to create this war so we can perpetuate and by the way, Afghanistan is one of the largest opium production countries. And after the 1980s, the opium skyrockets in production. And or during the 1980s, I should say, while we were in there, weirdly enough, supposedly fighting. But hey, it's a natural byproduct of anywhere the CIA is, Vietnam, wherever they are. Drugs just seem to rain down everywhere. So the Mujahideen morphs into Al-Qaeda, morphs into ISIS. And so do we have what you call sleeper cells, I call Gladio cells. The sleeper cells, as they're oftentimes referred to, if they're a connected ISIS / Al Qaeda, that was created and funded and trained by the CIA, along with MI6. And in the case of Hamas, Hamas was originally funded by Israel to go to war with the PLO. So you find none of these touted terrorist organizations just created on their own. They are funded by these same people that are engaged in the strategy of tension. And I want to draw your audience's correlation to something else. So the original Gladio cells in Europe were fashioned off of an enemy called the Soviet Union. Well, it's not irrelevant that when the fall of the Soviet Union was very well underway in the late 1980s, and it formally fell like in 1991, that's the birth of radical Islamists. We didn't have radical Islamists before then. Did we have pirates off the Somali coast? Yeah, but we didn't have this thing called radical Islamic terrorism until we needed a new boogeyman to replace the Soviet Union.
So it's not real.
Oh, it's real. They'll kill you, but it's not organic.
It's not a panic.
It's not organic.
Oh, not organic. Okay. They said it's not a panic.
No, it's not organic.
They'll kill you. Is it? You mean it's not organic because they're pissed at us? Because I mean, we are the boogeyman at this point.
So, the terror cells, ISIS, Al Qaeda, none of that is organic. That was all created from the intelligence agencies, the collective intelligence agencies, all of them. And they go around doing the bidding of the people that created them. Do you have a few rogue people out there? Possibly, but the majority of the events, large events that have taken place and ISIS blamed or Al Qaeda blamed or whatever, has been orchestrated by this intelligence apparatus as false flags.
And Osama bin Laden?
100% controlled by the CIA.
There are goofy things on the internet, but you never know what's real and what's not anymore. That his real name was Bob Osman.
I have seen that. I don't know that that's true. I've not found any proof of that, but to me, it's irrelevant. He was a controlled asset of the intelligence apparatus.
And when 9/11 is considered a false flag, at what level? Like how much of the information, because there's still so many people that are like, you're fucking crazy when you say that. I mean, I get into I was there. I watched it. I was in New York City. I was standing outside watching the second plane hit. That gets into other details where people say that second plane wasn't even ever there because of other operations that the government has in place, like, holograms and all this sort of stuff. I don't know how much of that stuff is real, but as far as it being a false flag event for us to get into Iraq, what was like with all of the, I mean, I'm not going to even ask. I'm just going to tell me what your take on that is, and why are we not seeing any of the files that will justify it at this point? Maybe the bigger question is it the CIA versus the USA right now?
That's, again, the CIA does not operate in a vacuum. There is an international, what I refer to as Praetorian Guard, that is hired and in place to protect the oligarchs. So are we at war with the people that both control the intelligence apparatus internationally? Yes. Are we at war with the intelligence apparatus? Yes. And I think that if you step back a little bit and you start looking, and we started to go there a little earlier when I was talking about my laundry list of things that had to happen, one of which was USAID being closed. But this is illicitly funded in large part of with the narco. I mean, that's by some estimates, and of course it's all illicit, so it's hard to track an actual number, but many people believe it's about $1 trillion a year that is generated just on the narcotic piece of it. And if that is true, if it's anywhere near that, I mean, it's definitely at a conservative $500 billion market. That money is a portion of that money is siphoned into these operations. It is how they've been able to fund all of this terrorism, these covert operations around the world. And so if you step back and you think about that, the only time we've had every president since Nixon do this war on drugs, never been a war on drugs. As a matter of fact, the more money we spend on the war of drugs, like Plan Colombia or whatever it is, that was tens of billions of dollars that oversaw the escalation. They like quadrupled the amount of cocaine during the Plan Colombia war on drugs. So all we have been doing, they've been laundering our taxpayer dollars down to basically subsidize these narcotic operations, train the militaries down there, train the national police, blah, blah, blah. So there's never been an actual attempt to take those networks down. For the first time in my lifetime, I'm watching it in real time. The first day when Trump blew up one of those narco boats, I mean, I could have had a party. It was like, holy shit, we're actually going to do this. And then most people don't even know about, if they know about it, they don't understand the significance of it. When the Colombian president came to the White House not very long ago, he came with a list of US banks that are participating in the money laundering. And I want to tell you and your audience something that I found. There is an organization called the Egmont Group. It is located in Canada, but it is basically the international repository for all financial transactions. It's very, very important. And FinCEN in the Treasury Department gets the data to track money laundering from this organization. Now, everybody in the audience should go, well, wait a minute. If they have the ability to track all of the money, and there's $1 trillion out there every year running around being laundered somewhere, why haven't they stopped it? Well, it's not because they don't have the information, because it's all in this system. So when the president of Colombia announced he was coming to the White House with this list of US banks participating in it, Egmont cut the Colombian feed to the Egmont Group off because Colombia had done the research using the Egmont Group data to trace the money and where it was going. And they immediately cut his feed and cut him off. And I was like, holy crap, that's big. But again, nobody's talking about it because no one knows anything about it. So then I was doing a completely separate research project the same week, a couple of weeks ago, and I come across that word Egmont again. And I was like, that's weird, two times in 1 week. And it was called the Egmont Institute. It's in Belgium. And the Egmont Institution is what created the Egmont Group that they located in Canada. Well, what is that? Well, it's the subsidiary of the Royal International Institute of International Affairs, the counterpart in London from the CFR in the United States. And they're one of the controlling bodies that kind of where the oligarchs all meet and decide how the world's going to run. The RIIA is huge. It runs the Rhodes Scholar program in London, the London School of Economics, Oxford, all of that stuff is all done under the auspices of that. And I'm like, wait a minute, the same people that are screwing with us with the CFR and the RIIA runs the entity that is supposed to be tracking their money laundering. I'm
Is that
like, you
really
got
the Belgium? What there's something I have here about Belgium. I can't remember what it was, but I think it had to do. Oh, I mean, you know what I'm talking about, but I can't remember the key word.
Brambart, the Brambart murders
Which
under
murders?
Gladio.
Which
So
murders?
in Belgium, back, and I don't remember if it was the 1980s, I think it was, they had several domestic terrorist events called the Brambart murders, where they had assassins driving around the city assassinating women and children in grocery stores.
Oh no,
And
no, I don't know that.
yeah, that was a Gladio event too. Those were Gladio operators that were trained in the Gladio program in Belgium. And there was a whole bunch of different initiatives going on in the government, and they were just basically terrorizing their people to get them to go along with the, surveillance state and whatever legislation they were trying to pass.
No, this was something else where there was a regime change, I think, I think it had to do actually with the Soviets and something about resources. I can't even remember. I'm trying to look through.
One
Uh
of the former colonies of Belgium was the Congo.
oh,
And
that's what I'm thinking about.
yeah,
Yes. Okay.
and that was a very interesting one, since we were talking about JFK. So Patrice Lumumba gets elected as their first prime minister. And he immediately tells Belgium that they are the sole source of uranium at the time. And this is in the
Right.
late
Yeah.
1950s. And so the US buys all of the Congo's uranium, and Belgium had set that up. They had the concession in there because it was their colony. And so Patrice Lumumba says, yeah, that's nice. And you're taking all of our profit, and you didn't build any schools. You didn't build any hospitals. We have no education here. Like 5% of the country was literate. And so he says, I need that money, and we're no longer your colony. We're our own country. So I'm going to go to the United States, and I'm going to negotiate a new concession with them. I'm still going to give them all of the uranium because I want to be just like them. I want to be a freedom, educated, prosperous country. So he comes to the United States. Eisenhower's president, Nixon's vice president, and he's the head of state. He's a brand new country, the Congo, not a colony anymore. Eisenhower refused to meet with him. Nixon refuses to meet with him. So the only person that'll talk to him is the Secretary of State. And he tells him to pound sand, that they are not renegotiating the contract. Everything that they're doing is going through Belgium, and he can just sit down and shut up. And so he goes back and he kicks the Belgium military, who was still running their military at that time, and he tells them all pack their bags and leave. Well, that causes all kinds of consternation. So the CIA goes into Katanga, which is the state within the Congo that had all of the resources, the uranium, the gold, the diamonds, and everything, and they create a civil war. And then they succeed from the Congo with all of the resources, and NATO helps them. And then they decide they're going to kill Patrice Lumumba, and they did. And then they boiled him in acid, so nobody could find his body. And they did that. They killed him on January 17th, 1961, the day Eisenhower gave that famous speech of, oh my God, I think I created a military industrial complex, after having given the order in December to kill Patrice Lumumba.
Wow.
And JFK comes into office 3 days later, and he doesn't find out that his CIA killed Patrice Lumumba for like another 6 weeks. No one in the transition. He met with the CIA repeatedly. He met with the State Department. Not a single person that was in on Eisenhower, Nixon, no one told JFK that we ordered the execution of Patrice Lumumba.
And amazing, because that speech, that Eisenhower speech, all of us patriots that listen to that, and all of us who think we know it all at this point, we always think, he was trying to tell us, he was on to something. This is one of the good guys. And Jesus Christ. Or do you think he was captured? Do you think he gave
Oh,
that speech
well,
because because look, I think that even, I still want to believe that there's some hope and some good in Trump. Who the hell knows? I don't know anymore. Everything is so confusing and no one knows what's going on. But I can't help but feel like, even because I love Kennedy and he's in there now, I can't help but feel like they have strangleholds around them at all times, and they get to matriculate, like they get to move around a little bit within this little, they're they put them in their sandbox and they say, you can do this much, but that's all you can do, because this operation is so much bigger than you little presidents and, HHS and all these different agencies there. The only agency that really fucking matters at the end of the day is going to be the CIA and how they run the military for themselves. So, I'd like to think that there is some goodness. And when I hear Eisenhower's speech, like, I'm still just hanging on to that ounce of hope, knowing that Eisenhower might not have been as good as everybody might have thought he was, especially based on that speech. And, I'm a lot, that was a long time ago, and my kids are going to be listening to that speech and thinking that that speech is a really important speech. So I would hope that maybe he was, again, compromised throughout his entire presidency by other powers that he couldn't answer to.
so he was courted by Sullivan and Cromwell, the Rockefellers, and the Dulles brothers going in. He was compromised the day he got in, because he would have. He was actually recruited by both the Democrats and the Republicans. He had his choice on which ticket he ran on. So he was going to be president regardless. It was just a matter of who was going to be sitting in the chairs, because there is no difference between the political parties. It's all fake. He could have done the exact same thing as a Democrat as he did as a Republican, because it's just a different ball team. They're both playing the same game. So if Allen Dulles and John Foster Dulles, both basically Republicans, wanted to sit in those infamous seats that Eisenhower gave to them, they had to get him to run as a Republican in order to then have Republicans in the cabinet and be guaranteed those positions. So that's basically what he chose to do. He was under their thumb. As a matter of fact, I'm reading this book right here, Safe for Democracy, right now in my podcast, and it makes it unequivocally clear. He actually says it in his own words, Eisenhower, I can't fire him. He was recommended repeatedly, get rid of Allen Dulles, get rid of Allen Dulles. And he basically told everybody, I can't fire him. So he was captured the day he went in. He remained that way. And a lot of people point to JFK's, his dad's mafia ties and stuff like that, Joe Kennedy. But I honestly think that they thought they owned him when he got elected, and he proved to them when he began talking détente with the Soviet Union and opening backdoor channels to Cuba. They became very aware, and his communications with Charles de Gaulle, his communications with Sukarno during that was in Indonesia. He was talking to everybody, and Sukarno, the CIA tried to overthrow him in the late 1950s and then successfully did it again, tried again and was successful in the 1960s. Because Sukarno was a threat to their world order. He was a neutral country, kind of like the BRICS are looked at today. They didn't want to align with any of the major powers. He wanted to be able to trade with everybody free and openly, and that's a threat to them. And so he was not allowed to remain president. They actually went to Hollywood and filmed a porno video of Sukarno. They had the CIA guy create a mask for a man and shot a porno film with a woman to use that to blackmail Sukarno.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about that then. Clearly, and my friends don't, I talk about, this is my own thing. I have this innate sense that maybe Charlie Kirk is alive. To me, that was maybe another type of operation. I don't know. And everyone's like, come on, there was all this blood. And I go, do you know how many times I've been outfitted with a chest plate or a thing on my neck that explodes with blood? I mean, I've done it before. I'm one of the people that have actually had those casts made to my body. So, I don't know. Sometimes I look at the presidents and I think, oh, well, is it the actual president that we have here today? Or do we have a really stellar actor up in front of us? Like, I just don't know anymore because I know what Hollywood is capable of. I do want to ask you about that. But before I even go there, two more coups because they're present. And I think that people can maybe relate to them maybe a little more. And I guess that would be, I remember when I was watching the Bolsonaro Lula event unfold on YouTube, and everybody was in the street protesting. It was huge. And they disappeared. I looked those videos up like like a month later or something. I haven't looked now, but they were gone. And I was like, hell. And then all these doctors and all of these freedom fighters were posting kind of secret videos and BitChute and Rumble. Like they couldn't even get them onto YouTube about what was happening in Brazil. That one and Zelensky, because no, people still don't get it. I don't know. So just if you mention a couple of things about how they managed to do that, since we are in the business of operating coups across the world.
So specifically about Ukraine, are you talking about when we overthrew the government in 2014 or?
Yeah, because that's the one I guess everybody talks about the most. But yeah, I mean, mention 2002. Is 2002 or 4? What was the first?
2004. So 2004 kind of set the stage for 2014. And in 2004, they have the type of election where if neither candidate gets more than 50%, if 3 are running, then it goes down to the 2 people, and then they have the final election and whoever wins that one. So they had the first election, narrowed it down to 2 candidates. Then they have the second election, one clearly won. And they orchestrated boots on the ground chaos throughout Ukraine, major cities in the West. So the 2 candidates was one that was neutral, that wanted to trade with Russia. The other one was a NATO puppet. And so the boots on the ground insisted that the NATO puppet was cheated in the election, and they caused so much chaos that the neutral person agreed to have a third unconstitutional, it's not even allowed in their constitution, election that he then lost. So the NATO puppet is in charge, which is basically considered a coup. Because without the foot soldiers and the USAID troops on the ground and the CIA agitation, that would have never happened. So fast forward to 2014, you basically have an election, and the Donbass region, which is ethnic Russian, that's the eastern part of the country. And because it's very industrialized, there's a lot of people there. The rest of the country is primarily agricultural in nature, and so they don't have a lot of population. So generally speaking, you're going to get a pro-Russian or neutral type of government in a free and fair election. And so that's what happened. And that was not okay with NATO. So it was like all the stops are pulled. We've got to get money. We've got to get boots on the ground. And so you have things. This one institute that I came across is called the Albert Einstein Institute. It was ran by Gene Sharp, and it's one of those that's billed as peaceful protesting. It's been present in all of the Eastern European countries. Basically, what it does is it focuses on the youth and teaches them tactics on how to escalate peaceful things into being attacked by cops, which is what we're seeing with ICE here. It's this exact same training. And so they immediately engage. You mentioned Victoria Nuland. All of them were involved in channeling funding into there. John McCain at the time, him and Lindsey Graham made several trips to Ukraine during this period of time. John McCain, most people don't know this about him. I mentioned earlier the National Endowment for Democracy is kind of like the kissing cousin of USAID. The National Endowment for Democracy gets tens of billions of dollars over the course. Reagan set it up in early 1980s. And there's 4 pots of money. There's a pot of money for Republicans called the International Republican Institute. There's a pot of money for Democrats called the National Democratic Institute, something like that. There's a pot of money for unions, and there's a pot of money for the Chamber of Commerce. And all 4 of those people get together and fund these coups overseas using National Endowment for Democracy. And the Republicans and the Democrats just basically pick, whichever country. Well, John McCain ran the IRI, the International Republican Institute, for 25 years. He was the chairman of that entity, funding coups all over the world. And most people never put those 2 things together. So while he's running for president in the United States, this bastard is funding coups, overthrowing governments around the world.
Is that why Trump hates him?
Yes.
Is Trump a good guy? Who's who anymore? What the fuck is going on?
I am telling you, he knows things. And if he tells you somebody is bad, it's just a matter of time before you're going to figure out that person is definitely bad. I was shocked when I found out what John McCain's real background was. I won't even go into the fact that I have a very good friend that was a POW with him. I knew things, but I still gave him the benefit of the doubt. He was a POW. But when I found out that, I was like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. This is crazy. And so, yes, the National Endowment for Democracy funds regime changes and destabilization all over the world. And John McCain ran it he resigned from the chair. And Lindsey Graham's been a member for a long time. He resigned the chair when he left the Senate.
Wow. So, okay.
The entire time he was a senator, he was running coups.
So all of these organizations have American names. They're all English spoken names. So are there, Gladio might have been an Italian name. So are there pockets of these all over the world for all of these nefarious, I don't know what it would be. Would it be the Committee of 300? Would it be, or is it just America? Are they just using us as a terrorist?
No, the international syndicate, there's people from all over the world. There's oligarchs everywhere. There's Indians, there's Chinese, there's Japanese, there's oligarchs from all over the world. If you would envision, and the Fabian Society talks about this, basically orchestrating like a round table and dividing the world up into like Pan America, Pan Europe, Pan British Empire, Pan Arabia, Pan Asia, and then having somebody sit at this high table as a representative of that hemisphere or geographical region. And then you have the next set of tables that report up to that carry out their evilness. And those are the CFR, the RIIA, the Committee of 300, the Bilderbergs, those types of organizations. And everybody that sits there, they're all billionaires, and they all have foundations. And these foundations, because of the way they're structured, are all anonymous donors and make a perfect opportunity to fund the action, the jackboots on the ground, because the CIA can dump endless amounts of money into these foundations because it's all funded by private donors.
And it would be CIA and MI6 and Mossad. Are there other?
Yes.
Are there other
All
ones
of
that
them.
we?
Every
There are more?
the Italy had, I think they changed the name after the exposure of Gladio, but it was the SDECE in Italy. They all have them. Every one of them has an intelligence apparatus. Like it was the Savak in Iran, and Saudi Arabia has theirs. The ISI in Pakistan. They all have them.
And they all have equal control to ours, and they're all working together.
They're all working together. I don't know that I would say that they have equal control, because there's definitely a pecking order inside of that community, because they rely on the funding from the CIA and the narco illicit funding apparatuses. So many of them are an appendage of like what you might call the big three, which if I had to point three of them, it would probably be MI6, the CIA, and Mossad.
Okay. And then what makes some people think that Trump is outside of it and operating as a, I don't know, a white hat, or that he would be, that he actually is it and part of it and part of that order?
Yeah, if you go back to his first presidency, one of the very first things he said is he was getting no intelligence briefs from the CIA ever. He didn't want any of their information. He knows all of it's bullshit. They just make it up to say whatever they want him to do. They just manipulate them. And you just saw recently where Ratcliffe and Tulsi Gabbard just issued like 9 or 10 of them saying they had been rewritten because they were based on absolutely nothing. So if you start, and those are the ones that go back to the election interference, 2016, they were actually producing national intelligence estimates that were based on nothing. It was all made up bullshit, and that they had to either rewrite them or pull them all together because they were so full of crap. And so those are the types of things. Trump does not rely on any CIA intelligence data at all. He has his own sources, whatever those are, I don't know, but I do know that he does not rely on them. And that his cutting them off in his first term was, again, if I had a laundry list, that would have been on my list. So he's shutting down the narco trafficking, which is a huge funding source for them. And I don't think it's coincidental that all of these private equity funds that all have anonymous donors investing in them are all going belly up now and closing the amount of money that you can withdraw from them right after an actual war on the narcotics trafficking occurs. I don't think they're not related. And so you cut off Venezuela, you cut off Iran, which was a huge source of illicit funding as well. And then you find out that the Ayatollah had, $200 million worth of real estate in London, and everybody in Russia is sanctioned, but not the Ayatollah. Are you kidding me? How did he buy all of that stuff there? He's been supposedly sanctioned in the United States, but the UK, France, where he hung out before while the Shah was in charge. Most people don't know that either. Why would you have the Ayatollah hanging out in France? He lived there for years. And then he comes back and supposedly he's the bad guy. I think all of that is controlled narrative, and that there are arrangements with the Republican Guard. Basically, the Republican Guard is the Savak, just with a new name. They do the same thing.
So then what? God, I mean, I don't want to drive you insane, but I have to. I have to. You're here, and I must drive you insane, and I must ask more questions. Oh my God. Okay. All right. All of these different events that have, at this point, I have a hard time not believing that everything is not theater. I feel like everything is being manufactured, manipulated. I think everything feels like a psyop now. I can't tell what is a false flag and what is not. Um, People were absolutely losing their minds, the people that voted for Trump, when the Maduro thing happened. And then all of a sudden, half of his aside from the fact that they're furious at him over Israel because they believe he's the first Jewish president, and people are now looking at this from like a totally strange point of view. I don't think that, I know a lot of my Persian friends here believe that he's here to liberate the Persians, that, it's funny because it's the right wing Persians here that are looking at the Persians celebrating in Iran that there's regime change. And a lot of them, I guess, would be considered the super liberals that are out there, celebrating. Everything to me is so extremely confusing. Let's go back to Maduro for a second. When that ship was bombed or whatever it was, the Narcos, the first place I went was, is there really a drug thing in Venezuela? I didn't really know that, and I don't know the history of Venezuela. The only stuff I know about South America, it was a lot of the Nazi stuff. I don't know, and of course natural resources, but I didn't know about all of these coups that were always taking place. I know a handful. I can't believe how many actually have taken place. But because Maduro is the most present one, what is that situation? What is the reality there?
So Venezuela has a very interesting history. Did you know that Jeb Bush was a banker in Venezuela?
No, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, he money laundered the drug. Venezuela is not officially part of Operation Condor, which is kind of like the cousin of Operation Gladio, where we went through the continent and basically overthrew all the governments. And it's not ever mentioned as part of the like 6 or 7 countries that formally participated in Operation Condor, but it has everything, a mirror image of it. For example, it had the Office of Public Safety, it had the black site prisons. Nelson Rockefeller basically ran that country. He owned a bunch of grocery stores there. The Rockefellers were involved in the oil. It was a very corrupt country. It had been a very corrupt country for a very long time. As a matter of fact, it is that corruption that Hugo Chavez was fighting back against when he initially tried to coup the CIA-controlled president and was thrown in jail in the early 1990s. He gets out of jail. He makes it his life's purpose to go around the entire country, find out what people wanted. They had a very low literacy rate. I mean, it was like 10% over the course of the time. And they're oil rich. None of that money was making it down to the indigenous population. And so you have this elite group that are all bought off. And every country is very similar to this. So in order to be able to control the country, you have to have a controlled elite group, right? And they are leeches. They suck off of this government that has been installed in these countries, and they're the protectorate of that military dictator or president that has been installed, whatever it is. And so when Hugo Chavez gets elected, and he does get legitimately elected in like 1998, and immediately he goes on the attack. He knows who the elite families are that's gotten rich off of these illicit land deals where they basically stole land from the peasants in order to create these big haciendas, blah, blah, blah. So they immediately flee the country. And that's why in South Florida, we have this monstrous Venezuelan expat population. Same thing with Cuba. When the mafia was running Cuba and the CIA was down there with Batista, they're running heroin in through there, cutting with the sugar from the sugar plantations. Everything on Cuba was owned either by the elite families or the mafia and the CIA in bed with each other down there. So as soon as Castro comes to power, they all flee. and we get all of the corrupt people in South Florida. And, they create these informal militia Cuban exile communities, and the CIA trains them, equips them to be assassins. And then we deployed the Cuban exiles to Angola in Africa, to Nicaragua. You mentioned that earlier. To fight the Sandinistas. They were in Guatemala to overthrow the government down there, Arbenz, and they just use them because they've been trained in the country under the Office of Public Safety to do that to their own citizens. So we're not going to squander that resource. So they just create these communities here in the United States with these ex-pax assassins, and we use them at the CIA's discretion around the world. So in Venezuela specifically, almost immediately, the USAID goes in and they start funding Juan Guaido's and that Maria Mercado, however you say her last name. She creates an NGO down there. They send in like $25 million, another $30 million into overthrowing Hugo Chavez. And that doesn't work. And then they have a referendum. And this was not a grassroots effort. There was violence down there, and they basically bullied him into having a referendum. He wins the referendum. Immediately, he was accused of cheating in the referendum. And he continues in power. It gets turned over to Maduro. There's arguments on both sides as to how dirty Maduro is or how corrupt he is. And what I find fascinating about he is now by CIA assets in the United States, former CIA agents, which there is no such thing. He's now being accused of running our elections. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yeah, I have.
But can you imagine if that's all made up bullshit and we're actually, the CIA is the one I told you their first election interference was 1948 and they've never stopped since. So can you imagine if you took the opportunity to write this book called Stolen Elections, blaming everything about our stolen elections on Venezuela, and you go pick up Maduro and you have him sitting in a jail cell?
So then what are they doing with them? What is this? So this is because everyone's blaming Trump.
Well, supposedly he's cooperating with them.
Cooperating with
in
Trump?
The election interference. Because Venezuela is being blamed for creating Smartmatic, which is being blamed for the election corruption, except going back to the story I just told you about all of those expats fleeing Venezuela in the late 1980s. Do you know who created Smartmatic? Not in Venezuela, in Miami. Ex-Venezuelan expats that fled Venezuela from the very elite families. Those three men that created Smartmatic live in the United States, not in Venezuela. They moved here in 2000, right after Hugo Chavez became president. So they are part of that elite family that were in bed with the CIA.
So in my mind, everybody's talking about this was the most atrocious thing ever. What an evil bastard. No approval from Congress, no nothing. Just going in and taking charge and just steamrolling people. Trump. This is all of my friends who voted for Trump, right, who are now anti-Trump. Right. And I'm just trying to understand because I'm anti-nothing. At this point, I am literally just an audience member watching the Truman Show. Like I don't even, I'm fascinated.
Do you think, let's just turn the table 180 degrees. Let's say China wanted to come in and snatch Trump. Do you think China could do that without somebody on the inside?
No, I believe that this was all coordinated with Maduro and Trump.
And if not Maduro, at least his vice president, there had to be a shit ton of people on the inside of Venezuela in order for us to do what we did.
Right.
if
I mean,
not
I
Maduro.
almost wonder if the same thing goes for the, the Ayatollah. Like, I'm like, is this guy even dead? Like, well, I don't even I question it all now. Like, I don't know what to believe because of the false flag, because of the psyops, because of the deception that is nonstop. I mean, October 7th, Bondi Beach, 9/11, Jonestown, every movie that's ever been made, the ICE protests, it never fucking stops. Laurel Canyon. I live in the canyon and I know that now apparently this was all a sham.
The entire thing was a sham. So again, this thing overlaps. So I read, what's his name? The guy that wrote the Laurel Canyon book. Shoot, his name's
Chaos,
is, huh?
chaos, or the other one,
No, the guy that was the construction guy that wrote the Laurel Canyon. He wrote the book about We Didn't Go to the Moon. He's from Southern California. Oh, what's his name? Anyway, the book he wrote about the Laurel Canyon basically goes through all of the different 1960s, early 70s musicians and how they were all related to CIA or military intelligence. And the studio in the article he wrote about the fact that we didn't go to the moon, that studio was a designated Air Force base in that area. And I was stationed at Los Angeles Air Force Base in the 80s, and I had no idea that facility had ever been there. It had been decommissioned by that point, but no one ever talked about it. I'd never even heard of it until I read that book.
Yeah, Jared Leto bought it. The actor bought it. And supposedly there's tunnels that go under there that go to the Getty. I mean, that's a conspiracy theory. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's interesting. But there are notorious tunnels under Los Angeles that people talk about as far as, I mean, there are Starbucks under there, and a lot of celebrities are hip to it and they're allowed to use these tunnels, which I think is slightly disturbing. I don't know why.
I was out there during that crazy time. I was there in the late 80s when they found that tunnel system under that daycare.
I don't even know this one.
Oh my gosh. It made headlines everywhere. They thought that the kids were actually describing being taken out of the daycare into this tunnel system, and no one believed them.
So
I'll send you the story. It was the craziest story I've ever heard.
I think I know what I think now it is, but in the 80s I sure as hell wasn't paying attention to anything but myself. College, crazy. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people say there are tunnels that go all the way to the Getty for whatever reasons, but I mean, I'm sure there's tunnels underground everywhere. I mean, I remember before this war broke out in Iran, I was reading about all these tunnels under Tehran, of all of these ancient cities under there, and all this sort of like, artifacts to our deep, deep past. And nobody really wants us to know the truth about anything in the past. And they want us to keep moving into the future with all this crazy technology and all this AI stuff. And now the films, I mean, I guess that brings me to the films and how much of the military is involved in that, because the Pentagon produces a lot of films. I never knew that until the last 5 years.
We have an entire detachment out in Los Angeles that are advisors to Hollywood.
But it's not like they're advising, like, no, you're not shooting that gun right, or you're not getting that piece of history right, or maybe they are, maybe they're, I mean, a lot of it feels like predictive programming.
Well, they definitely don't need the military. There's been CIA people out there that approve scripts, write scripts, hands them the scripts to shoot movies with. That's a well-established fact.
So are those being used to sort of control the narratives on certain topics?
Absolutely. If you go back and you watch, and this is kind of funny, I have probably, my middle daughter is like the biggest Tom Cruise fan ever to live. And you go back and you watch some of his movies, it's eerie when you understand what Operation Gladio is, and you just go, holy crap. Yeah, the whole Matrix, all of the different uh, videos. And another really weird thing is a lot of the names of the different operations that the CIA has done either they're in movies or they're in video games. If you look up Operation Condor, all you're going to find for the first 20 pages is a video game.
Wow.
And it's all about Operation Condor.
So is it about normalizing all
Yeah.
of the evils of the world so
Yes.
that no one cares when these actual truths become revealed and people have to consume them?
So let me give you the best example I've came across yet. Just recently, I had someone send me a article that was written about a thing called Detachment A. I had never heard of Detachment A, and I spent 3.5 years doing this full time. Detachment A was the most highly classified entity post World War II set up. It was classified above classification. That's how classified it was. People that worked classified programs in Europe had never even heard of Detachment A. So when you got tapped to go to Detachment A actually has a website. And they've had reunions. It got declassified from 1949 in 2014. That's how classified it was. It was not declassified until 2014. So these men have had reunions, and there's video on their website of them talking about things that they did while they were there, because now it's declassified. Well, Detachment A was commissioned after the war ended to, remember I told you about all those German weapons being cached all over Eastern Europe by Hitler? Their job was to go to each one of those sites and switch out the weapons from German to NATO, because if you activated that cell, you couldn't very well go, oh, here, look at all my German weapons and my German ammunition and my German gold and my German comm equipment, right? So it all had to be interoperable with NATO standards. And this unit would go and put concertina wire around the whole weapon cache, build these temporary tents, and then dig all of those weapons up and exchange them with NATO compatible weapons. And this was a function of Detachment A, but they were also a stay behind unit in Eastern Germany, in Soviet occupied area. So there's a whole bunch of different aspects to that. So I'm reading all of these things. I'm watching all of these videos on this website, and I get down to like the last paragraph. Their nickname was A-teams.
Wow.
And then I read that when they got done with their European mission, they went to Vietnam. And I'm like, A-team as in the TV show A-team? Yes. Yes, as in that exact thing. So they take something that is basically really, really not good, and they make a television program called the A-Team, and they're heroes. They're all heroes. You can hire them. And, they were basically ostracized over here in Vietnam. Now they're the good guys here, and they're helping all the people out. So if you tell somebody about the A-Team, you're like, but those are the good guys.
Wow. Yeah. God, the deception. It's just so much. Well, I mean, I guess, okay, I'm going to ask about the last two big ones. And I'm sure there's more. And I know it's a pattern. I mean, I don't know how to look for another false flag. But at this point, I mean, everyone's warning that there's going to be false flags right now. Everyone's saying that we're about to, I mean, I'm getting word that there'll be a nuclear event off of the Atlantic Ocean. It'll be a false flag. They'll blame it on Iran. And I'm like, yeah, I just don't think that that's going to be them. I think it's going to be the people that are actually running the world. And there's not very many of them, but somehow they've got us all beat. October 7th, Bondi Beach, January 6th, all of these events that were the latest ones, all of the ICE protests. When we talk about Soros, everyone's always like, Soros. Is there more to that? Is it, are these fabricate, like, are these actually, I couldn't help but think October 7th. I don't understand how, that, to me, it was just there. It was another 9/11.
It was another 9/11.
Yeah.
There's no other way you can analyze the sequence of events, the standing down of the military on the guard post. You can't spend the amount of money that they do on intelligence and security and have something like that happen that was not immediately stopped. It does not happen.
I totally agree immediately. Bondi Beach. I don't know much about that, but Emily was asking about it, a producer, what you thought of Bondi Beach.
I think it's all the chaos to orchestrate the strategy of tension. Yep.
Charlie Kirk.
I so I'm not in the camp where I don't think he's dead. Do I think that the powers to be of, so if you go back in history, you just mentioned patterns, and that's what I look for. Anybody that is a unifying figure that has a clear message and the ability to articulate what's best for the United States, absent of party, will be assassinated. That's been thrown. I don't know if you are familiar with Fred Hampton. He created a thing in 1960, in the later 1960s, and he had been a Black Panther. He created a thing called the Rainbow Coalition. It was getting all ethnic poor people to work together to better their lives and to address the oligarch system of how it's an us and them kind of system. And his ability, just like MLK around the same time, his ability to talk across races was a threat to this operation, because when we look at strategy of tension, the tension in America has always been identified by race. So if you can just keep those two things fighting with each other, we can do whatever the hell we want, right? So anybody that walks across racial lines and has a unifying message will be assassinated. The FBI broke into Fred Hampton's house and assassinated him and everybody in his house. And that's the same time frame where they assassinated MLK, they assassinated RFK, so Malcolm X. So all of those things are related. You are not allowed to have a unifying message, and especially if you're going to do it on the college campus, because that's their recruiting playground. The college campus is the CIA's playground in order to do LSD experiments, psychological operations, whatever it is, recruiting. So you are not allowed to do that on college campuses. And Charlie Kirk not only went into their lion's den, he was winning the argument.
Yeah, he was. That was, I mean, he turned us around. We were lifelong progressive liberals that found ourselves at turning point. And we were like, I think we belong here now. I think that our party is upside down. Now I realize there's no party, of course. Well, I always knew there was no party, but for some reason I had Trump derangement syndrome. Then I voted for Biden for the first time ever. And then after that, I voted for Trump that was it. I voted twice in my life. I never believed in voting before because I never thought it mattered. I figured it's always going to be an installation. And the oligarchs would go with whatever party is going to be the one that everyone is crying for the most at the moment. And I knew this time around it was going to, but a lot of people are saying that Trump is the Trojan horse to usher in the new world order, to usher in the control grid, the biometrics, and that's, I can't help but say that, the minute he got into office, I started to see all of the, all the technocrats, but I do wonder if there's like, sort of a divide between the technocrats and the old time oligarchs. And I also always wonder why the faces of everything, the names of everything have never changed. It's always Rockefeller, Rothschild, Bill Gates, all, the Bushes, the this, but there's so many more. I mean, they're the faces. I mean, I think that my people are behind a lot of this. I think that, I think the Vatican is a huge military arm that nobody really talks about that much. I don't know. I don't even know. I don't even know. And yes, this whole podcast is about trying to unify people and to forget about
We
lines.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast just on the Vatican and their role in
Oh,
Gladio.
I'm bringing you back. What am I looking at? Oh, here. Oh, yeah. I have all of the Vatican stuff in front of me right now.
Yeah.
I need to learn. I want to learn more. So maybe that would be another wonderful opportunity for you to come and spend an afternoon with me. We can eat
Right.
Italian food while you do it. While just stuffing our faces, chewing into the microphones about the freaking Vatican. When I went to Rome when I was young, I wanted to go in there. I was dying to go in. I do love I was raised a Catholic. I love the inside of these cathedrals. They are the most beautiful things in the world. But of course, they are dark. There is a darkness in there and you can feel it. I couldn't get into the Vatican. They wouldn't let me in because I had a tank top on and I never got in there. And then I just went to Italy again and everyone's like, we can't go to Rome. We can't go to Rome. And I was like, God, I'm never going to get into the Vatican. And I thought to myself, you are not meant to step foot into that place. You are not meant to be there, Dre, because it goes against every friggin' thing you believe.
So one of my best friends was one of the military attaches in Rome when I was I was in southern Italy around the port city of Brindisi. We had a
Yeah,
spy
by
base
the
down.
way, I love it there. I'm going there for 5 weeks, by the way, Brindisi.
Oh my God, I hate you. So I was in San Vito, which is just outside of Brindisi, had an Air Force base there. It closed in 1994-ish. I was there until 93. We were closing the base as I was leaving, but it was an electronics eavesdropping base. Had the big elephant antenna out in the field in the front, where we intercepted all the electronic communications going on in the Mediterranean. I loved the 3 years that I was there. I loved Brindisi. But my friend was at the Rome embassy. And so I would go up probably once every 3 or 4 months. And they have a staff of cultural experts there for, the CIA, the military, the ambassador that knows where all of the back shop good restaurants are in Rome. And they have backdoor access to all of the big, cultural things. And so I got a private tour of the Vatican,
Oh, wow.
and we got to go up into that little walk around where the dome is, and with my friend because he was part of the embassy staff. So um, I was fascinated by but I'm big into architecture too. I went into every single cathedral I could go into. There's one, and I will try to find the brochure I have. There's one that you will have to go to that's in southern Italy. My daughter, she was in third grade, my oldest daughter. They went on a field trip and it freaked me the hell out. There is a church in that area of Italy that was invaded during the Ottoman Empire and the people were hacked up, and they all ran down into the basement of the church, and they invaded the church, hacked them all up, and there's these glass cases. So they have two spirals in the church, and they have these glass cases that does not have like formaldehyde or anything in them to preserve the bodies, and the bodies are all still there, like
How
nothing ever happened to them. other than them being chopped up.
I don't know how I didn't see that.
And they have these big shutters on them. So when you walk into the little spiral, you're standing in like a circle area and they open these things. And it was like one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. And I'm like, we've got third graders. What the hell are we doing here?
Oh
But
my
it was
God.
gross. Yeah. And it was just their constant reminder of, that time, the invasion and stuff like that. I'll try to find, I kept a brochure because it was like
Wow.
horrific.
In the
Yeah.
South, it was in the Bari region, in the Puglia region.
Yes. Yeah. So, and interestingly enough, my landlord, I was one of the only people on base that never moved, or that was assigned there that never moved on base. I wanted to live in the community. So we mentioned mafia. San Vito, the military people, because they didn't have enough base housing for everybody. So you eventually got to move on base, but I didn't want to. My landlord was somehow connected. I don't know how, because every American that lived off base, during some time that you were off base, your shit was going to get stolen. Either the stuff outside, we had people, they would drill holes in the side of the building and have a kid crawl in and unlock the door and steal shit out of there. And I'm
Jeez.
like, this is a freaking Catholic country. Well, how can you guys be such big thieves?
Savage.
It was crazy. And so my grill was outside, my kid's bike was outside, we had all of her toys outside. There was not ever a thing out of place at my place.
Wow.
Ever. And so their last name was Puglias. And so they were a family out of the original family that whole area was named after.
Yes. Who are the big Italians? Is there a Pugliese? No. Farnese. Ugh. All those.
Lonese, that was their name. And him and his brother, you know where Caravigno is?
Yes.
Um,
Salvetri.
so San Vito had like a Home Depot, an Italian-owned Home Depot. My landlord owned that one. His brother owned the one that was in Caravigno, and his daughter, my landlord's daughter, opened like one of those. We would call it like an IKEA furniture store with a high-end Italian furniture. Just before I left, but yeah, I loved it there. I loved the family that I rented from. They came out every summer and lived out there. They had a pool. I lived behind a vineyard. They had fruit trees everywhere. It was the best 3 years of my entire Air Force career.
I had never been there. I went for the first time last summer, and by the time, because we were touring the whole boot, I took my kids for graduation. And by the time we got down south, I was like, we can relax now. We're going to relax, and I fell in love with that region. I was like,
Yes.
I could probably stay here for a summer and just chill, because it really just feels like it's just a beach town. It's just a beach town kicking around all in the heel. But yeah, we were supposed to film there for 6 weeks, and I'm taking my son with me, so I'm excited. Sounds like you had your whole family there, which is
Well,
nice.
my husband and my oldest daughter. I didn't have my two younger kids until I came back, but yeah, I loved it there. We did a lot of traveling. I mean, we went to Paris and the Netherlands and Germany and London. I had another friend that was at the London embassy. We went up there and spent Christmas one year. But it was just Italy as a matter of fact, we had tickets to take my two youngest daughters has never been. I was actually pregnant with my middle daughter when I came home. And whatever, I know you know this, but most people don't. I fell in love. I'd never had an artichoke in my life. I had never I had never eaten eggplant. So that's a very agricultural area, right? So my landlord would come out every summer and they made all of their own tomato sauce out there in the vineyard area. And they also made the marinated melanzane, the eggplant. So when I was pregnant, my last 8 months there, I came back when I was 8 months pregnant, and was assigned to the DC area. But the entire 8 months, my landlord would bring me warm homemade custard like every other night. She would drive from town because most of the time they only were out there in the summertime. They were in town in San Vito the during the wintertime. And so she would drive out to my house and bring me homemade custard. And I ate their entire cellar full of the melanzani. I I was just like, I had a craving for that stuff and I ate it and ate it and ate it. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, but I just love
Oh,
this stuff. So
I'm
yeah.
surprised your kid didn't grow up with a mustache and hair on her chest if it was a girl. Because the
It was definitely a girl.
very acidic. It's like it hurts your mouth if you eat enough of it. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but it'll
No,
actually cut up the inside of your mouth. And where
no,
I in Queens, my neighbors had a procession every June where they would make the tomato sauce. So that was my initiation to that. And we did that in Queens, and it was quite an event, and it was the greatest thing ever. I didn't get to experience the food in Puglia. I didn't get to, because I was in all these hotels and I was going from town to town, but I never made it to Bari. And apparently that's where all the little old ladies are making the pasta and all.
okay. So you know that every region has it. I have to tell you my pasta story. You know that every
I don't know. I'm
region,
going to be there.
okay, so every region has its pasta specialty. So the Puglia region is orecchiette,
Yeah, I love
and you know that's the ear.
I love them.
Okay,
How they stick together and they're al dente and they have sausage and broccoli. Rob, okay, I'll stop. I'm starving
so
now.
do you know how they make that?
Like with their fingers. We used to make it. Me and my grandma used to make it.
All right, so the way they make it is they roll the dough into like a pencil stream and they use a butter knife, the end of it, and they like dig it into, they like chop a little piece of the pencil off and they dig it into it so that it curls back up around. And
Oh,
so there's this they were always trying to teach me all this stuff. Like I would bring them stuff. I took them on base and got them hamburgers and stuff like that. So we were just, ended up being part of the family. And so I came over one night because I wanted to see how they made the pasta. There's this little old lady. She had to have been like 80. She can barely walk in, and they lived in a 3-story like gold-plated palace in town. And the bottom story was their kitchen with the big 50-gallon barrels of olive oil and the big 100-pound sacks of flour all lined up on the wall for their pasta production because they cooked every day. And so I'm sitting at their kitchen table and I'm watching this little old lady. It takes her like 10 minutes to get across the floor to get
no.
set in. And so they had 4 daughters and the mom, and they're all sitting around the table and me. And this little old lady sits across the table from me. And she gets her a big chunk of dough. She rolls it out. And I'm not kidding. Her hands were moving so fast, I couldn't even see what she was doing. And I'm looking at Tina, my landlord, and the daughters, and I'm like, Rosella, what the hell? What the hell? That woman can't walk and she's just going through them pencil strips like, holy shit. I'm like, she had the entire tray filled in like 5 minutes. And I'm like, I don't even know what I just watched. And me, I'm still on my first one because I keep digging the hole in it and I'm not getting it the right pressure. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not doing this. This is too embarrassing.
Amazing. My grandmother, she cooked for 40 people until she was 93 years old. She wasn't allowed to drive anymore. All of a sudden, she's in the kitchen, and it's like, it's insane. And then once my mom wouldn't allow her to cook anymore, that was it. That was the beginning of her death. It's like she started to die. And I was like, Mom, you should have let her keep cooking. I don't know. My mother was also, my mother was anti-cooking because she grew up with all these Italian ladies that would make you cook. I had to be the one who was like, I'll cook and I'll also have a career. I'll do both things. Okay. My mom was like all or nothing. She's like, I'm never cooking. I don't want to be like these Italian ladies, you know?
So
Uh,
my landlord said that. I commented to her one day because I've never seen her sit down. The whole 3 years I was there, I never saw her sit down other than to eat dinner, ever.
my
And she
grandma,
was always eating something.
insane.
And I said to Tina one time, I was sitting out in the backyard one of the summers, and I'm like, Tina, come sit down with me. I want to talk. And she's like, I can't sit down. I'll either go to sleep or I'll die.
It's amazing. They won't stop.
No,
It's amazing, and that's definitely a thing missing from I think from our world right now is how the Italians like they have their little community and their sense of purpose. And my feed has been like on my Instagram now. They gave it back to me. That's probably another thing I should ask you about how they're how they're manipulating us through social media now and all that. But yeah, my whole feed now is Italian old ladies out of nowhere. I'm like, why am I getting fed all these little Italian old ladies instead of war zones and stuff like that? Well, I don't know. I want to go right into the Vatican, but I will not do that to you. I will I'm going to have to let you go. You don't understand how many pages I have here of things that I want. Can you hear this? It is like normally I have cue cards and like that I just keep out in front of me with big letters, but no, this is pages. This is a whole notebook filled with questions on this particular topic and ones that kind of, I guess it's like a hydra and it
it is.
just goes all over the friggin' place. And and everything ties into it. I mean, it's just absolutely everything. And I want to know so much more. Like I want to take apart every single sentence that you spoke today and then be like, and then what about this little piece that falls off of that part? Like I mean, I'm sitting here with this. I won't, I'm not even gonna do it because I know I've kept you for a long time today. Um,
We'll definitely schedule another one. I really, really enjoyed this.
will you do the Vatican with me? Will you teach me about all of the tentacles in the Vatican?
I don't know all of them, but I know all of them attached to Operation Gladio, and it's huge.
Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah, there's so much and again, I was shocked. And so that's why I found this so liberating where that my feed is full of every time I post something nefarious, it's like, oh, it was the Jewish people. No, no, that was actually the Catholic. No, that was the Protestants. They did that. And so you come, that's why I call it the international syndicate, because it is not one religion, it is not one country, it is all of them against us. And there are so many people out there with narratives that they want to run with. But I have to say that I was extremely shocked at the depth that the Vatican, in particular, the role that they've played, not just in Vietnam, but in Cuba and in Operation Condor. And it was shocking. But again, the Protestant church has done, they were behind the overthrowing of the Queen in Hawaii in the late 1800s when we basically colonized Hawaii. So there's no innocent religious orders out there, none.
No, I don't think so. But I also don't really believe that any of them have any religious affiliation. I think they hide behind the veil of the idea of any kind of religion, and then they use that as a holy war on top of everything. And I don't think that the people that are really in power are Jewish or Christian. I think that they're at
Oh,
this.
absolutely.
I mean, I'll just say it. They're friggin' Luciferian at this. I
Yeah.
mean, these are diabolical people that are, and I
Yes.
also feel that they use religion and they use all of these religions the same way I think that they're using the Jews now the same way they used the Black communities here in America, or trying to divide us with the gay communities in America. And like they were just they use everybody as a pawn in their game.
There's a book written about that that's called The Cloaking Device. they cloak themselves in this religious or ethnicity or whatever. I'll get you the name of the actual book, but it's called the cloaking something. But it's the perfect illustration of the adaptation of all of those schisms in order to wrap themselves in this noble robe in order to carry out their satanic bullshit.
I totally, yes. And then before I let you go, one last question, because it's my world, the media. It's your world now too. You know what? All of us are in the media now. All of us. I'm not even in my own media. They won't even have me in Hollywood anymore. So this is where I am. But how much do you think we are being controlled, not by the legacy media anymore? Because we all know that is a joke. Even though for some reason, if they were to make all of these announcements and all of these revelations, somehow the people would now maybe believe the truth about things, even though most of the people of America now know that it's all horse shit. But now the alt media feels captured. Like it feels like they're trying, because now that these, nefarious people at the very top whose faces we don't know, it seems as though they've infiltrated the alt media in order to control that narrative, because now there's going to be a media underneath them that is the ultra freedom fighting narrative. Do you believe that?
Oh, absolutely. Any effort, I mean, I go back to, the Fred Hampton scenario, anything that is aligned against them will be infiltrated. And there's so many examples of that. There was an exercise called PATCON that the FBI ran that was basically Patriot aligned organizations, legitimate ones. Every single one of them was infiltrated by the FBI, because you can't have something they don't control that threatens their power. COINTELPRO, all of these things were operations ran on American communities that they viewed wasn't towing the line of supporting whatever government they had chosen for us to support. And so it only makes sense if the people aligned in the MAGA movement is seen as an existential threat, which they certainly are, because they staged January 6th as a result of that to tar them all with extremist mantra that the community of the Make America Great Again would be infiltrated. And what I have found very interesting is some people that I think are fairly smart and I know to be patriots can't see it. And that's very disturbing to me. I'm not saying that I call all of the balls and strikes correctly, but I am saying that if you actually watch people in a disinterested type of, kind of having principles to go by, so the people you brought up, the whole Venezuelan, how everybody was like, oh, we don't want foreign wars. And then, we go into Venezuela and they're like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Well, I'm sorry, but I thought you had principles, and that's what I keep telling people. I'm going to look at everything objectively. I don't let my thought that Trump is actually legitimate and he is fighting against this, because the indications that that's true far outweighs anything that he's messed up and didn't do. Like, I'm disappointed he hasn't defunded National Endowment for Democracy. But does that mean that he hasn't? USAID was so much bigger. So you have to look at everything, critically. But if you look at some of these people come out of nowhere, like literally nowhere, and they have these huge, huge followings. They are not organic. And I find it very interesting to point that out, and it pisses people off because they're looking for manna from heaven. Oh my gosh, these people are saying all the right things. well, except for this one thing and this one thing and this one thing, and then it kind of undermines their entire message. So there's definitely a lot of people out there that have infiltrated, but just look at Fox News. Fox News is not independent.
No.
Newsmax is not independent.
You just look at shareholders all day long and figure it all out.
Yeah. And so I find that just very interesting that the people that will sell themselves as, oh, I left the Matrix, and I definitely took the red pill, and then I see them go running off of some shiny object, and I'm like, did you really, or did you just join another one?
I'm on the white pill now. I'm on this white pill where I want a happy ending to everything, and I want Trump to be, making all the right moves. But man, the narrative out there and the way everything's getting spun, and it's just the actual stuff that we're allowed to see. Venezuela was the first, I guess. Now, he was the guy who said no wars. I'm the guy of no war. I'm the guy of peace. And now we're going to build a casino on the Gaza Strip. It's hard to argue. I can't argue with anybody, and I'm not an arguer anyhow. I think everybody should have their own opinions, and I don't feel like they always need to be debated. But it's hard to make a case these days. So I'm asking questions because I want to understand better. Like, I don't have any desire to be right. I just want to understand what the hell's going on. And it's becoming harder and harder to understand what the moves are. But, you're ex-military, you study this stuff all the time, which makes you still a warrior, defending the country. But, with what's happening right now, being a veteran, what would you say to a kid who would get drafted into the situation that's going on right now? Because I know the general consensus now is a low. It's not, I want to defend my country. It's a lot of people saying, don't you dare go defend a billionaire's war over God knows what, because no one seems to understand what's actually happening.
So for the first time in my lifetime, I enlisted in 1979. For the first time in my lifetime, we are not in a foreign war with tens of thousands of boots on the ground in some foreign country for the purpose of harvesting drugs.
Wow.
So that is literally the history of the United States. That's why we were in Afghanistan. That's why we were in Vietnam. It hurts a lot of people to actually say that out loud. That is 100% why we were there. And so if there are remnants of a system that has perpetrated this international syndicates operation, either through illicit funding, through things like the Iranian Republican Guard on the Hezbollah side, or the ISIS, I want it all taken out. I want the difference in the methodology used, where you take an elite group, go in and snatch somebody and leave. We've never done that. We've never done that. We are go in, bust the door down, offload 20, 30, 500,000 troops, and literally bull in the China cabinet, knock everything down in the entire country, and then pay Halliburton or Brown and Root to come in on American taxpayer dollars and put together all of the pieces of the shit we just broke, which fed money to another cartel of military industrial complex people. So it was a perpetual machine that generated and stole our wealth and gave it to this oligarch class, where Trump, whatever the target is, sends a shit ton of missiles in there, takes out the threat, and doesn't put a boot on the ground. And if the ground has a boot on it, it's a temporary boot to snatch somebody's ass and get back on the ship.
Okay.
So if we have to take out bad guys, I would much prefer the method that is being used, and I would be 100% behind it, than what I saw when I was on active duty, when I deployed to the Middle East, and when I was spent 6 months in Iraq, because that's a disaster.
Yeah. So you think he's trying to snip away at this Hydra that is out there,
100%.
which seems like
100%.
it is such a massive effort if he were to really try and cut the heads off of all of these entities that have been there for hundreds
At
and
least
hundreds of
100
years.
years.
Yeah.
That he's at least trying, and he's the first one other than JFK that's ever even tried.
Well, let's see when he announces that he has help from the Galactic Federation, because that is, I mean, how else, aside from having God on his side, possibly, but there's got to be another military operation that is helping him, if that's the case. And that's, I guess, something that we could talk about another time, because he's got to have his own army if he's going to be able to operate like that. You know, a crew of people that are there to protect him, because every other president, or, you know, everybody gets taken out.
He has his own private security.
I think it needs more than just security, especially if he has people that are helping him. It's a lot. It's the unspoken, I guess. We'll just leave it at that for today.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here and talking to me. This is a brand new podcast. We are trying to unite people to understand what's actually going on in the world and to stop hating each other, because I really think I don't think the president can do it by himself. I don't think that Kennedy can change all of the issues, and I believe Kennedy's in there to do some big things too. I don't think that he can do it by himself. I think it takes all of us to scream and shout, and not in some orchestrated event that is created by the people in power. You know, it has to be organic, and a lot of us have forgotten what it's like to care about each other, to fight for ourselves, to fight for each other. Everybody's sort of desensitized, and I think, you know, from all of these movies and these video games and all of this kind of nihilism that's been perpetuated onto our kids, that we should hate ourselves for ruining our planet and for ruining the social justices and all this. I think people just don't have confidence in themselves and in their neighbors and their government. In the military, I think everybody in their medical institution, we are in a really weird time, but I feel like it's a beautiful time, because it can kind of just, you know, catapult us into a place of trying to unravel the past and learn more about what's happening right now, and trying to really remember where we come from, like who we are, not who those people are. There's very few of them, and there's so many more of us, and I believe we have all the good in us. Yeah, there's going to be some rats in between, but yeah. So you are shining a light so heavily on the past, and a lot of, you know, my generation of kids, my kids, they're not going to know the truth about anything. They're not going to know the truth about any of the wars. That everything is a fake narrative. It's insane. So thank you so much. I'm bringing you on here all the time, as long as I have this show, so that you can keep teaching me what you keep learning in your 700.
Thank you for being brave enough to reach out. So many people are so afraid of this topic. So God bless you for doing that. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't feel afraid. I feel like it's so important. I feel like there's a force field around me. I just hope that my crazy, as the Italians would say, strega ways, like, I'm not a witch, obviously, but I just believe that I feel like God's around me all the time.
That has been my journey through this, because so much of this, as I partially indicated to you, my life has crossed paths with this monster so many times, completely unbeknownst to me, that I feel like God did that to put those things in context for me so I could talk more passionately about it. I absolutely believe this is a mission.
I do too. I do too. I know people might think sound crazy, but I do feel like I'm always being guided right now. I don't
Yep.
know.
I just, I love maintenance stuff. I love fixing things. And so I had a cousin who was like my big brother because his mom raised my mom. That joined the Air Force, and he'd write me exotic letters from all over the world. And one day I was in the mall with my friends and I said, hey, I was going to school my senior year to college, but you had to pay for it back then. They didn't have full-time early admissions or anything like that. So I worked full-time at McDonald's and went to school full-time my senior year at a community college here. And I was just like at the end of my rope. I was wore out, broke, and they had this big poster on their window for the Air Force, which is the service my cousin went into. And it said $419 a month, free college. And I'm like, well, that'd be cool. So I just walked in there. I am a rebel. I have never conformed to anything. I've never made my bed a day in my life, except for when I had to in the military. I never wear shoes. I can show you right now, I'm barefooted. I hate everything about structure. And so I had a very hot temper and I had a foul mouth because I hung around my dad all the time.
That kind of girl.
And so I went into the recruiter's office and, just chit chatted with them with my girlfriends. And so I went home. My dad happened to be off the road. He was at my mom's. She ran a little food town, like 7-Eleven store near our house. And I stopped in to chat with my dad. He was sitting down at the end of the counter on milk crates, turned upside down. And I leaned over the counter and I said, you'll never guess where I was at today. And he said, where? And I said, I was at the Air Force recruiters. He almost fell off those milk crates. He said, Roxanne, you wouldn't last 3 days in the military. He says, you don't get to talk back to anybody. You have to make bed and you have to clean your room. You can't do any of those things. And I looked at him and I said, I could, I just don't. And he goes, yes, and that's not allowed. And I'm like, and I had already learned how to drive my dad's semi. I could do all of the gear shifting. I could back it up. I could do everything. My dad in 18 years had never told me I couldn't do anything in my life, ever. And I'm looking at him, I go, I could, I just don't want to. And he goes, no, honey, you could not do that. So I was devastated. And I got in my car and I drove back down to the recruiters and I told him, I said, I'll do anything in maintenance. And they had just opened, this was Jimmy Carter. They had, because it was 79, they had just opened aircraft maintenance to women. And they said, well, we need aircraft maintenance. And I said, that's what I'll do. And
Wow.
2 weeks later, I was in San Antonio at basic training and I worked on T-38s and KC-135s, the aircraft refueling aircraft. And I was the first woman that any of those men had ever worked with. They hated it. Their wives hated it worse than they did because we had to go on, trips together for deployments. And they they blew a gasket. They did everything they could to sabotage me. They would spread rumors that I was sleeping with so-and-so or whatever. They hated the fact that there was women working with their husbands. The men were kind of like, I didn't even weigh 100 pounds back then. And they were like, there's no fucking way you can carry that toolbox. Well, not only could I carry the toolbox, I knew how to use everything in it.
Oh my
And
God.
so when I got over to work on KC-135s, they have like this area in where the front landing gear is up in that area. They have what's called a liquid oxygen converter, where like if you have to wear oxygen mask, it's actually a liquid, a very high pressurized liquid. And the tubing is ran so that by the time it gets to the pilot, it's gas, actually oxygen, not liquid, because that'd kill you. And it's very unstable. So it's you have to have a lot of caution when you're working around it, blah, blah, blah. So that system is actually in that wheel well. And so a guy has to get up on a ladder and like cock their body around and get around where the converter is, where I can sit in it because I'm 5'3". I can climb up the ladder, sit in that thing, and work on it all day long. And so they found out over time that it was very convenient to have someone like me around. Plus, I have a brain. When something broke, I was very good at pattern recognition and troubleshooting. And they're like monkey wrench turners, not to say anything about them, but they just were like brute strength kind of, I don't really understand the principles of electricity or whatever. And so I'm just going to keep taking out boxes until I get to the one that fixes it. But that's not the way I'm made. If I'm doing anything, I have to know everything about everything. And so I ended up getting to go back and being one of the first female instructors at the tech school. And I loved it. And I honestly thought when I was selected for that ROTC scholarship that I was going to get to be a maintenance officer because I just loved being around the flight line. I loved working on airplanes. I loved everything about it. And those assholes made me a personnel officer and gave me a desk. And I cried for 3 days. I was so pissed off. But then I spent the next 22 years making their life miserable, pointing out everything in personnel that they did wrong.
Wow.
So I
Amazing.
became a royal pain in their ass.
So what, all those ribbons behind you, that's all those medals, and
Yeah,
that's
so yeah, I was prior service, so those are my ranks. I made staff sergeant, which is E5, and then that's my second lieutenant bars, and I went all the way up to colonel. I don't know if you can see at the top of this box.
oh my goodness.
So all of these coins, do you know what challenge coins are?
No.
Okay, so in the military, when you are wing commander or above, you are authorized to have what's called a challenge coin. And the challenge coin, I made one for Operation Gladio. This is the challenge coin that I made for Operation Gladio.
Oh, I've seen that on your page. The
Yeah.
star.
So if you are like a lieutenant and you get assigned to escort a general officer and you do a good job, they give you their coin. So when you go to the officers club, which no one does anymore, you used to go to the officers club every Friday night. It was mandatory. People would put their challenge coin on the counter, and whoever had the highest ranking coin, whoever had the lowest ranking coin had to buy beer for everybody at the bar. So if you look at this, like this one right here that looks like a dog tag, that's well, I was at CENTCOM on 9/11, which is the command that went to war in the Middle East. I was on General Frank's staff, and that's his coin. He gave that to me for a program I set up there. This is my challenge coin. My last job, I was a wing commander, so I got to design my own coin, and that's mine. It actually has my name on it. And those are my dog tags. That's my air staff when I was assigned at the Pentagon. That's my maintenance badge, my personnel badge, my commander's badge. But these are like the top ones that I covet the most. This one right here, when I was deployed to Iraq, I worked for an Army 2-star. He gave me his coin, and he had engraved it with the date I pinned on Major. He came to my promotion ceremony. So they're just memories of.
And you went, they deployed you to Iraq to work on stuff?
So I was in Iraq during Desert Storm originally, like in 1991. I was there for 6 months. As a matter of fact, while I was stationed in Italy, I was deployed to Iraq. I was in the northern sector with the Kurds. General Jay Garner, the guy that I worked for, was the northern sector of Iraq's commander, and I was his aide, which is like a gopher. You go everywhere with him. You're his shadow. You make all his phone calls for him. You do all the protocol when VIPs come into the theater. So I got to meet General Powell and all of the people that came over there, all the congressional delegations. I was their escort when they were in the area. And I did that as a lieutenant. That was like such a mind-blowing experience for me. But I did go back a couple of times right after 9/11 when we were building, because normally the whole concept of operations when something like 9/11 happens and we're going to war in the Middle East is to pick up the CENTCOM command at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida, and move it into the theater into Qatar, because we have an alternative command post there that is where the 4-star is supposed to be conducting the war. That's never happened. They always stay in Tampa and they just travel back and forth. But we were setting up, because he wasn't going to go like he's supposed to forward, we had to build a coalition staff in Tampa. And I worked in personnel, and so it fell to us to create the billeting, the food, basically we ended up with like 4,000 coalition forces from all of those countries in Tampa. And one of my jobs was making sure all of that went smoothly. Identifying how many each country wanted to donate and blah, blah, blah. So it
Oh.
was it was it was a mind-blowing thing, and it had to be done like within 30 days. It was the craziest thing. We didn't even go home.
Well, so when Trump, I mean, now I'm asking you freaking questions. I have one. I'm going to ask you one question. then I'll let you go. When Trump called that huge meeting with all of the generals, and everybody was freaking out about that at the very beginning, and everyone's like, "Why is he calling all of these people together?" And everybody's flying in to be in one room, which everyone thought was a terrible idea. What was that about?
I don't know. I mean, I don't have any inside information on that. What I will tell you, from my experience of understanding what he's dealing with, we have a lot of really corrupt generals. We have a lot of really, really corrupt generals. In every story that I've unfolded, not only did they spend time internal to the CIA, which blew my mind. I didn't know we had so many military people in the CIA. But the just one example, there's the CIA is notorious for setting up fake banks, like a bank called the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI. It was basically just a CIA front that grew to be the 7th largest bank in the world, to launder their money. That's why they use the Vatican. There was a bank in Australia called Nugent Hand. If you go to Nugent Hand, not only was Michael Hand, a special forces guy that got out off of active duty to be the co-person of this fake bank that was huge. It had branches all over the world. Every single branch was ran by a retired general officer. The president of the company was General Yates, a retired full 4-star, and every single one of them knew it was a fake CIA bank to money launder.
Oh my God.
When you realize how corrupt, I mean, McMaster, the guy that took over from General Flynn when he had to quit, um, uh, was corrupt. McChrystal is corrupt. So I honestly think that what was said to them is, we know all of this. We know that there are many people sitting in this audience that are corrupt, and that will not be tolerated here. This is your warning. This is your warning order. That shit stops today. None of that is happening under this watch. We're on a new sheet of music. And if you do one fucking thing like that, if I see one email, and NSA monitors them all, if I see one communication that indicates that you're not on board, you will be fired immediately. That's what I believe happened. I don't have any proof of that, but they had to all be in a room, because here's what happens. We play the telephone thing. If you just did the 4-star, because they all have 4-star meetings, all services have 4-star meetings. If Hegseth would have just went to every one of those and then depended on those corrupt assholes to go then relay it to the 3 stars and then the 2 stars, that would have never worked.
I see. Interesting. Okay. I hope you don't mind, but I had to hit record while you were talking about that, but we don't have to use any of that. When you were talking about you being a tomboy, but I didn't even catch it. I was like, oh, I want that story. I want her
We
to
can
open.
tell that story later. I do think that for people to understand people's backgrounds and where they come from and where their passion is, it adds legitimacy, especially when you're trying to tell people the truth, that you're just a normal person. I didn't, um, the last place I ever, and my kids still tell me, Mom, I can't believe you're talking to Drea.
Oh,
They, because I never envisioned myself being here. When I retired in 2008, I had spent most of my 30 years as a single parent. The last fucking thing I wanted was another
me too.
job. I wanted to be able to enjoy my retirement, and I have a beautiful tropical yard here. I live on an acre. And that's all I did was I played in my yard. I grew flowers, I grow fruit and vegetables, and that's my passion. I love doing those types of things. And I have spent literally the last 3.5 years with my nose in a book. I've read over 150 books on this topic alone. And it has consumed my life. But I think after I read Anthony Sutton's book, I'm like, nobody knows this shit. If no one knows this, who's going to tell them? And I just heard God tell me, you're going to do it. That's the reason why you're here.
I
And that
am.
I kept buying books. Every book has, an index in it. They have footnotes, and I just kept buying book after book after book. And I'm like, every time I buy a new book, my mind would get blown. And so I started doing the book reviews on X and on Rumble, and just started talking about all of this stuff. And it's been I'm censored on X a lot. And even the people you said about the whole fake uh right? There's so many people you would not believe. A lot of CIA people follow me. General Flynn follows me. Liz Crokin follows me. Not a single one of them will repost anything that I post. No,
Are
none of them.
are you afraid at all? Not really. You feel like you're protected.
Me? No.
Yeah. No.
So my husband jokingly said, like the first year I was doing this, we were out to dinner with some friends, and he goes, yeah, I stopped walking between her and the window a long time ago.
Oh my God.
But I carry a gun. I'm an expert marksman. Every time I ever shot, I qualified for marksman. So I don't have any fear, but I am also not stupid to not protect myself. So I know I'm on God's mission, and if God's mission means that I'm not here tomorrow, that's his mission.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you one last question, then only because you research everything and you probably have a better understanding of everything. And none of us seem to know what the hell's going on anywhere. What do you think the end game is with this with the situation we're in now with Iran? What do you think the goal and the end game and the reasoning is for it?
So
In your estimation.
so Trump has made it very clear that the first person, whether it's part of the mullahs or not, that steps up, that has the ability to lead that country and make a deal with the United States to not fund Hezbollah, not fund all of this bullshit, and deal with the international community, you're it. He has set no parameters. He's not excluded the mullahs. He's not excluded a secular leader. He's not excluded anybody. Somebody has to step up. In Venezuela, that's what they did. They set fillers out. Rodriguez was the one. Okay, we can deal with her, and she'll deal with us, and we're fine. I think that totally pisses off Israel. And there's so much of what Trump does that pisses off Israel,
I
which,
agree. And
yes,
no one sees that. Everybody thinks that he is
I
Netanyahu.
know, because they have a
I'm like, I
preconceived
don't
idea.
same way. I mean, even the other day when they were asking him, and it's all over the social media where he's like, ask Netanyahu. The man to ask is right here. Ask Bibi. Ask Bibi. I feel like he's just like he's making it very obvious. And then
He is.
when I listen to Tucker or Candace, I'm like, are they working for him, for Trump? Because that's how it feels. And I know people would never put those
Yeah.
things together. But for me, I'm like, I feel like they are his foot soldiers because he can't say shit. He can't
Yes.
say anything while he's in there because he's got to contend with the CIA, who probably doesn't want him there anyhow.
Well, they definitely don't want him there. They are the ones behind the 4 soft coups against him during his first administration. Every one of them has CIA. Gina Haspel was the London station chief during uh, hurricane whatever in the election season in 2016. All of the people that were arrayed against him, Brennan, it was CIA that set up Russiagate. It was CIA that set up the Eric Taramella, the guy that was the CIA. He actually was a CIA agent embedded in the National Security Council. That what became the quote unquote whistleblower for the improper Ukraine telephone call, which was completely proper and not in any way a weird thing. They tried to impeach him over that. And then January 6th, every bit of that was CIA operation, 4 attempted coups. None of them worked. So what did they do? They rigged the 2020 election. They bring in COVID. Biden gets in and then they arrest him 4 different times with bogus bullshit. So there's just been this entire array of a constant attack on Trump. And anybody that looks at what he's been through and thinks he's with them, they're literally morons.
I mean, yeah, it's hard. It's hard because there is so much theater that I can see how even myself included, I can see how it just becomes there's so much noise. There's so much noise and there's so much, deception, like we said before, and the false flags. I mean, everything's false. So no one knows what's real. That's part of the thing with Trump. It's like everyone's just like, well, if every president is put in there, and there is no 2-party system, then he's just another part of the fucking problem, I guess,
right. But if you believe that every president is put in there, then explain to me how JFK was killed. Explain to me how Nixon was couped using Cuban exiles, by the way, which we just said were Gladio operators. They're the whole plumber unit was Cuban exiles. So if the CIA installed Nixon, and Nixon has his own issues, Nixon did something that pissed them off so that they couped him, right? Kennedy did something that pissed them off that he couped them. So when the president does something against the deep state and the result is either you get couped or you die, and they have tried repeatedly to do both of those things to Trump, at what point does somebody not realize he's not working for the deep state? They're doing to him exactly what they did to the people who weren't going along with the deep state.
But some people will think that his assassination attempt was a false flag too. No one knows anymore. No one. That's the thing. It's so hard.
That's probably the worst effect of what the CIA has done. It's broken down every ounce of trust that anybody has with anything, and that is where they want to go. They want people to be disillusioned and not have any trust in their government.
Yeah.
And that is the end result. But at some point, to me, it's just logical to conclude that if you can't have staged the whole Russiagate, you can't have staged the entire January 6th aftermath where they threw all of those people. It wasn't fake. It happened. Was it what they said it was? Absolutely not. But it wasn't fake. I mean, my neighbors right around the corner here, 3 of them were thrown in prison as a result of January 6th. That really happened to them. Were they set up? Yes. Did they do anything wrong? No. But that whole situation was a staged, chaotic event with people. They caught one guy from Ukraine leaving the San Francisco airport, and the FBI let him leave. He was in January 6th. He was stopped at the airport in the international terminal, and they let that son of a bitch leave because he was one of the chaos agents. So there were chaos agents embedded in there to incite the people to get the cops to attack them with the aggressive way that they did, Were there innocent Americans that were caught up in that? Yes, because they were beaten, that Borland woman, and that's what happened to my neighbor. When he saw her being attacked, he tried to get the cops off of her, and he was arrested for attacking a cop. And that's just the staged events of how they get people. And then, of course, you had the whole fake trial and all that other shit. But it has been devastating what has been done to the community that really just wants their government back.
Yeah, and you don't really hear it with other presidents. I mean, it's true. There are pieces of it with Nixon, definitely JFK, and with Trump, but you don't really hear about all of, maybe Clinton was, doing what he was doing in the Oval Office, but other than that, we don't hear about the CIA putting pressure on these other presidents.
No pressure
Yeah,
was put on Bush Sr. because he was
or
CIA.
because
No, yeah, no pressure was put on his son because he was CIA.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, so even the Clinton thing, I mean, the only reason that ever even got exposed was because of Linda Tripp. Linda Tripp realized that the mega group, of which was the Epstein, Les Wexner, Adelson, all of those people that were part of the mega group, which was basically a bunch of old Jewish men that were oligarchs, funded the renovation for Clinton of the White House. And you know what Jeffrey Epstein's renovations include? Spy equipment and all kinds of stuff like that. So they renovated the White House, and Linda Tripp had stumbled across the fact that Clinton was being blackmailed. And that's when she found out that he had had sex with Monica Lewinsky, the whole thing about the blue dress. And she went public with that information because she wanted to free Bill Clinton of the blackmail. And of course, the the controlled right had to be out. That's all true. And
So
Monica
that
Lewinsky, by the way, is a Ukrainian Jewish person. I don't know if you know that.
I don't.
Yes. So there has to be. Clinton's one of them. I mean, he's a Rhodes Scholar. He was educated in London, but that was kind of like a controlled demolition where I'm going to pretend like I'm outraged. We're going to pretend like we impeach him to hold him accountable, but nothing ever happened to him, and he lived life happily ever after.
So she
But
was
they,
trying to help him?
yes, because she
Wow.
honestly thought he was being controlled by Mossad, and that would break their control.
Where is the Linda Tripp for whatever's going on in this administration? Some
I
people
don't
might
think he's
ask.
being blackmailed by Israel. I don't think they have any control over him at all. If you, as a matter of fact,
I feel like there is definitely some kind of control over him and Kennedy with I mean that's all everyone talks about is blackmail, 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 blackmail. Um it's I
I don't,
mean,
if you look at the things he did, so here's some things that go over people's noticing. Do you remember back when during his first term he took out Soleimani?
yes.
Okay. So do you remember him saying out loud at least several times that that entire operation was planned with Mossad and Israel pulled out at the last minute and wouldn't have anything to do with it?
I don't.
Okay. So that is true. Because the Mossad and has people embedded in the Republican Guard, and they basically are kind of a control chaos arrangement there. And there's no way Mossad was going to risk their relationship with Iran that most people don't know exists by taking out Soleimani. So they could not make that public. And Trump making it public that Mossad was actually involved in the planning of it went over like a lead balloon. And so, because most people don't understand the dynamics going there, when he just pops up and says shit like that, people go, oh, okay, no big deal. That was a big fucking deal.
Wow.
Um, yeah, that was a big fucking deal.
Wow.
because they didn't know how much intelligence Mossad had shared with Trump in the arrangement of that taking out. But irregardless of whatever it was, they knew where he was and they took him out. And so there's so many little instances of those types of things. As a matter of fact, this is just strictly my personal opinion. I have no evidence of this. I honestly believe that the reason why we attacked Iran when we did is because there was going to be a fake, and I shouldn't say fake, that's not the right word. There was going to be a controlled attack by Israel on certain sites. And Trump did not want that perception left that they were in control of this operation. And so we did what we did and made sure that all of the shit was taken out that needed to be taken out, because that was not the original plan. The original plan was not to take out all of the Republican Guard. There was recommendations made that we needed to leave that, because otherwise, how's the government going to be able to, manage the population or whatever? That's kind of like their FBI, if you will. And the decision was made, irregardless of what Israel thought, that no, they all have to go. And site by site by site, they were taking out every ability of them to control the population in Iran in the aftermath of this attack. So there's been several inconsistencies. Did you watch the footage of the last visit of Bibi Netanyahu to the United States?
Is that not the one where Trump keeps saying, ask Bibi, the man of the hour is right here.
Yes.
You can just
But
him.
notice, so I did protocol in the military. There is a certain state function that has to happen in front of the White House. These flags are put out. There's the Army unit there that do all of the ceremonial things. None of it was there for Bibi. None of it. And Erdogan was just there like 4 days before or after. He had it all. The flags were out. The military was out.
Yeah,
And
I don't think that Trump likes him at all. I never did. I never thought he did. I have a Palestinian friend in New York who was like, no, we don't feel, we're happy about this. And I go, why? He goes, let me show you a video I made a while back. And he sent me a video of Trump talking about Gaddafi, a video about people talking about how Trump was actually helping Gaddafi or hit him or something like that, or housed him during a contentious time, and was also showing how it is 100% obvious in all of these video clips of Trump's disdain for Netanyahu.
yes.
And I was like, okay, so whatever moves he's making, but then you hear Marjorie Taylor Greene come out and, and she's saying he's not playing 5D chess. And I'm thinking, but maybe he is. Come on. Did he tell you to say that? You guys can't hate each other. Come on. So yeah. I'm just so hopeful. I want to be hopeful. Everybody's so black-pilled right now.
Yeah, I'm definitely still very optimistic about the things that I'm seeing. Like I said, number one on my list has always been taking out these fucking chemical weapons called narcotics. And for the first time ever, I've spent my entire time in the military talking about this damn drug war that never existed. And so frustrating, talking about the helicopter pilots, the people that have been injured in furthering the narco trafficking. So I'm ecstatic that we're actually doing that. So as long as those things are going on and we're snatching the right people, as far as this network goes, and we're pissing off the UK. Anything that we do that pisses off the UK, I'm okay with.
I feel the same way. People don't understand what that's about. A lot of people don't. I mean, people in the alternative media do, but the regular person who's watching CBS, they don't know. They don't fucking why the UK. I joke around that that they're still pissed off at us because they just use this country. Now they just use that. I feel that way, that this country is being used to perpetuate all of the darkness that they have been doing for centuries. But
Oh, I can find quotes from the people talking about they will take us back. And that's what they did in 1913 when they
they
set up the
will take us back. They would
they were
like to
saying,
take us back.
so the Fabian Society was talking about regaining their US American colony. And that's in the late 1800s. And if you understand the reinstitution of a central bank in 1913, you realize that's the day that the reestablishment of their authority over the United States began in earnest.
And that also lines, is that the same thing or something separate? But that lines up with our whole tax system, right?
Yes, yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
And that's been used to extort us forever.
Man, those
And
bad.
all of that's why they all hate the Trump tariffs. That's another aspect of this whole thing. They hate it because prior to the central bank, our whole government was paid for with tariffs.
Yeah.
And so they know exactly where Trump's going, and it fucking pisses them off and it
But
scares the shit out of them.
how does he keep that going after this 4 years? And how do we, I can't believe how long I've kept you now. I feel like an asshole. And I did hit record just in case, because but the whole biometric thing that they're trying to put us on, and this whole system, this beast system they want to put us on. We have JD Vance in there. I don't know that kid is, I don't want to be, I don't want to say bad things about people, but he's tied into all those technocrats and all those other.
Okay, so Drea, put your soprano hat on.
Here we go. I have
If
a bullet hole in the back of my head already.
if you had the Chicago Mafia trying to edge in on the New York Mafia, would you not have some of the underling New York Mafia infiltrate the Chicago Mafia in order to figure out what they're doing and what their plan is?
100%. I always thought it was strategic. 100%. Because I thought it was going to
So
be Cruz. They might have just taken Trump out, put Ted Cruz in.
so there are some people that has spent time in some very nefarious organization. Bassett is one of them, the Treasury Secretary. He was instrumental in Soros breaking the pound. Well, who else would you want on your team if
Nice.
your intent is to destroy the UK's hold over the United States? Um, so I stay outside of that fray of, because I understand that if you are going to take down a system, you are not going to take down that system from the outside. There has to have been people that spent time on the inside. And that's why there are people like Whitney Webb, who I absolutely love her ability to research. But what she fails to understand is she has no strategic level thought process at all. Everything that she sees is tactical level. She cannot get out of her own way. So Trump bought a casino called Resorts International in the Caribbean that used to be a CIA front company, Mary Carter Paint. They actually created that. It was Mafia 100%. Trump bought it.
Is that
And
that's the
you
one
would
he bought money from the Rothschilds for?
I don't know. I don't know about the financing piece of it, but so on the surface, you're like, shit, he's one of them. He gets involved in the casino operations in New Jersey, and you're like, shit, he's got to be one of them. He's in the construction industry in New York that is completely mafia. Union ran, the unions basically run the mafia, blah, blah, blah. And so the mafia guys being interviewed on television, and they're like, how come you don't ever have any shit on Trump? And he's like, don't believe we didn't try. He We can't get anything on him. We can't control him. So if you the whole time he's a Democrat, he's in Hollywood with Oprah, he's everywhere in their network on television. And the whole time they think he's a Democrat. They think he's one of them. They show him all of the shit that he now knows that they're capable of doing. And the entire time they run Jeffrey Epstein at him and he throws him out of Mar-a-Lago. And so every single one of those opportunities gave him a view from the inside of their operation, which is why they fucking hate him now. He knows what they look like on the inside. And so you cannot hire people that don't look like on the surface that they were part of their organizations and be able to take those organizations down from the outside if you don't have inside knowledge of them. And so I've been very cautious not to smear or demean the people that are in his administration because I don't know what role they're playing. And I know 100% that in a military operation, you will not win if you've not infiltrated the other side.
I totally see that. That's how I felt about a lot of it. I mean, even Kennedy's cabinet, with the whole medical world, because that's another giant. I mean, I still think that the pandemic might have been another
It 100% was an operation, honey.
I mean, it was an operation to get us all in
And
line.
it
And I
wasn't
think
from China. We did it here.
of
We
course.
just took it to Wuhan in order to release it. So I'll go ahead and say that out loud because that is a proven thing. So here was my first clue. I'm 2000, fall of 2019, beginning of 2020. Two things happened. The first thing that happens is that I am sent from a friend of mine who was in the military and is in civilian medical. The changing of I think it was like 25 years old. There had been a manual that was published by the government on how to fill out death certificates. So there's two categories. I'm being very generic. Two categories. Here's the primary factors when you die, and here's the secondary factors. The guidance that went out, and it was like dated the beginning of April, did this to the death certificate. All of the contributing things became the top category, and all of the actual causes became the secondary thing.
Oh.
Because if I die in a car wreck, the car wreck is the cause, and COVID, if you test positive, would be a contributing factor. So they just reversed those two categories. And they did it in an interim update to this death certificate handbook on how to fill out. So if I died of a heart attack, but I tested positive for COVID, and don't even get me started on the tests, which are all bullshit, but it just flipped it. So I died from COVID, but I also had a comorbidity of a heart attack. And that's not the way it was prior to this change. Then the second thing they did was Fauci coming out and saying that for basically a chemical weapon, a biological weapon, you can wear a paper mask and you'll protect yourself. Now, this comes from a chick that spent 6 months in northern Iraq in 120-degree weather. And every time that fucking alert went off, we had to get in full MOP gear, which is the protection from a biological weapon. And it's a rubberized suit with this ginormous filtered head thing on. And when you got out of it and it was 120 degrees, you could dump a gallon of water out of the fucking thing because you were sweating profusely the entire time you were in it. And so I'm looking at my husband, the very first announcement that came on the news, I'm looking at my husband, I went, these fucking liars. Are you telling me I spent 6 months in a fucking desert in a full MOP gear when I could have had a paper mask? I lost it. I like screamed for like 30 minutes and I'm like, they're fucking lying to us. They're lying to us about everything. Nobody believed this. And then they come out with the vaccines. And I told my kids, I said, if you take it, you're out of my will. They're trying to kill us. They're literally trying to kill us. I will disown
Oh,
you if you're that fucking retarded.
oh my God, you are. Did your kids listen to you? Because a lot of kids
Yeah.
didn't listen.
No, my kids all listened to me. They knew because I would wipe them. Believe me, we have a long history here. If I say I'm going to write them out of my will, and they believe me about stuff like this too, because they understand that I've been on the inside of this machine. And I went everywhere. I was all over social media. I'm like, no, they're lying to us. You can't. And the VA, what do you mean? So I was under the care of the VA at the time because I was vaccine injured from the anthrax. And so I had to go to the VA once every 6 months. And I bought this mask because they were making people wear masks and I would not wear a mask. So I bought this mask that when you hold up, it's like women's lingerie, it's see through, but it was leopard print. And so I put that on and wore it inside, but because when you had it on, you couldn't actually see through it against your face. And so to me, it was kind of my rebellious nature. Yeah, I'll play your fucking game, but I'm not wearing a paper mask and I'm not wearing a real mask. And literally, I would hang that up. I told my husband, I would hang it up in my car, but it literally looks like underwear.
Well, you were like Lady Gaga and all those Hollywood bitches that were wearing their fake masks on stage when they had the Grammys, remote Grammys
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, oh
So that
my.
whole thing was a psyops. It was just really a test to see how compliant we are and to interfere with the elections in 2020.
Well, then what do we got? What do we got coming to us now? And then I'll really let you go. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think
So I
is
think
was
now there's too much control for them to, and there's too many people awake for them to pull something like this. And I honestly think by June, I don't like date fag or anything, but I do think by say June-ish, that there's going to be an executive order. There's going to be disclosure on the stuff that we took out of Georgia and Arizona's election to prove that our elections were corrupted in 2020. And I think there will be an executive order issued that says that we will only have paper ballots in November. And I expect there to be all kinds of uproar shit to go on with that. But we can't go forward as a country without those things happening.
yeah. I think there's going to be other crazy disclosures like and other false flags. I think we'll have a bunch of them. I don't
The closer
know.
they get pushed into a corner, the more desperate they're going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be a false flag. I think the weather is a big thing. I think they use the weather to manipulate us a lot and to have us believe in, I guess you could even, we started the podcast over chemtrails and stuff like that. But a lot of the weather events have been also, I guess, would be considered false flags.
Yes.
Um, so I mean, I don't know if that falls under Operation Gladio, but this whole manipulation of the weather and the use of, frequencies and EMFs and I mean, you were in the Air Force, all these airplanes that are filled with this technology to disperse all this particulate on us. Like it's a real, like this is an insane operation. But
So technically not Gladio, but still intelligence operation. Like, MK Ultra technically is not part of Gladio, but it is definitely part of the broader operation to control people under the whole chaos and control narrative. Gladio specifically talks about or refers to the paramilitary, which is what fascinated me because I didn't even know that existed. But when you dig into the CIA and what they were brought to bear in many of these countries, you can't separate the rest of the CIA operation, the psychological operations that were part of that. And so it does fall under this big umbrella, but not specifically. Gladio. And I don't tend, just because I'm not educated, and I'm not one of those people that like to talk about things that I don't know everything about, um, or at least enough to sound
Leave
somewhat
that to me.
yeah. So I recognize now, in the 1980s we had a satellite program out in Los Angeles that talked about defense meteorology program that was involved satellites. So I definitely know that we have capability to do things like that.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, those capabilities are not ever done to the benefit of mankind.
No.
Um,
I
so
feel like the pilots that are flying these planes are they're another version of a Left Behind crew, you know.
So, and I just got into a pissing contest with somebody on X because they kept trying to tell me it's military pilots. It is not. Those planes are flown under the NOAA, the National Oceanic Aviation Association, or whatever agency. Because we had a detachment of them here in Florida, in my hometown. There were NOAA aircraft at Linder Airport in my hometown here, that were flying those missions. They've been now outlawed in Florida. You're not allowed to fly those missions anymore. And mysteriously, that plane isn't sitting out there anymore.
That's
Um,
I know that they can only stop it at a certain level, but after a certain height in the sky, then it becomes federal airspace and they have no control over that. We can fight it at a state level, but I know we can't go farther than that.
yeah. So, um, I mean, obviously, they could sue the federal government. Weirdly enough, none of them do.
Dane
But
Wigington, I think the guy that we're always highlighting on our show, this is his mission. He's been doing
no,
it
I
for
mean the governors. Where are the red governors? Yeah.
well,
Why are
so
they
many states are doing it though. So many states are involved in the mission. They want the mission.
which
It's
is where we end up with there's no aisle in Congress. There is no difference between the R's and the D's. Because
yeah.
you would think, I think there's like 34 Republican governors. They could make a lot of stink. And they never do.
I mean, you would think this is a stronghold. They were the Republicans. They were the ones fighting for our freedoms, and then their skies are the most assaulted skies in America. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I better let you go. I
Okay.
feel like, how long did I keep you for today? Is this, oh my God, I just broke my face on my glasses and the microphone. Have I kept you longer than anyone ever?
Yes. Yes. But you have also been the more fascinating than anybody else I've ever talked to. And I just,
No.
yes, and I'm totally psyched that you're going to Italy, and I am so envious because I definitely want to go back there. We have to stay in contact. I would love to be over there when you're there.
Well, yes, Emily will give you all my information. She's so jealous that I got to talk to you and that now we're like two old girlfriends, like two old yentas, like two chiacchierones, as the Italians would say. Oh my God, I just want to ask you thousands of questions for hours and hours. So you're just going to be a regular here on the Ultra Free Show. We're new,
I would
we're
love it.
new, but it'll grow. And where can people find you? You're okay with the fact that I hit record again, right?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Already
Um,
did.
the I'm at my handle on X is at Colonel Towner, and then on Substack and on Rumble it's the Colonel's Corner.
The Colonel's Corner. I'll be hanging out on the Colonel's Corner. I gotta say it. I gotta hang out on the Colonel's Corner. Oh my God. All right. Well, thank you so much.